Your live interactive Weather Authority coverage will begin shortly. Your live interactive Weather Authority coverage will begin shortly. Special Weather Authority storm coverage is sponsored by Casco Bay Generators.
Thanks for joining us on the special broadcast on CBS
After
13.
weeks of preparations, Lee is finally here. Thanks for joining us on the special broadcast on CBS 13. I'm Katie Sampson.
And I'm Dan Lamparello. New just in the last hour, Lee is no longer a hurricane. It's now a post-tropical cyclone, but many Mainers will still feel its impact. We have team coverage this morning on all things storm-related. Our Mal Meyer will join us from Portland in just a few minutes. Emily Santom a little later on from Southport.
But first, because of the worst of the storm yet to come, let's check in with meteorologist Christian Bridges, who has the latest on the track and what this downgrade means, Christian.
Yeah, that's right, Katie. I wouldn't want to call it a downgrade because the impacts are not changing at all. This was completely expected. Again, we were looking for it to turn into a post-tropical storm, a nor'easter-style storm. And if you notice, the wind speeds have not been dropped, still at 80 miles per hour, and that is above hurricane force. So let's take a look at our satellite and radar. You can see all of the rain moving into the state this morning. Overall, it's not super heavy. And again, rain is not a huge concern today. It's the winds and it's the waves. And we're really just getting started here this morning. Expect things to quickly go downhill over the next couple hours. Likely after 7 a.m. we'll really start to see things going downhill here. And then the worst conditions later on this morning and into the afternoon. So let's take a look at some of our current wind gusts. Even in just the past few minutes, I've noticed they've ticked up a little bit. Winds gusting up to 31 now in Portland, 30 in Augusta, close to 30 in Rockland, 32 in Bar Harbor as of right now. Again, tropical storm force winds 39 miles per hour or above. We are all likely to see tropical storm force winds as we head through the day today. So again, Lee no longer a hurricane. It's a post-tropical cyclone, but notice those winds still at 80 miles per hour. And notice how absolutely massive this storm is. Still going to see those big impacts across the state today, even though it will be tracking to our east into Nova Scotia, and then moving towards the northeast out of our hair by tomorrow. Big improvements even by this afternoon and this evening. So let's take a look at our expected wind gusts here in the Portland area. Notice 8 a.m. still not too crazy out there, but later this morning, and especially as we get to the middle part of the day, notice we could easily see gusts approaching 50 miles per hour, gradually tapering off as we head towards the evening, much calmer as we head into tonight. And overall, we get a great Sunday to quiet down here. So here's all of our headlines for Lee's impacts out there today, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. today. That's when we're going to see the worst of those conditions. Frequent gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour, although in mid-coast and down East Maine, could see gusts at 60 or higher. Again, remember these sustained winds with Lee still 80 miles per hour. And even though that core of strongest winds likely stays away from Maine, may get close enough to where we see gusts in down East Maine approaching hurricane force. Coastal concerns, of course, 10 to 20 foot waves up and down the coastline here, and that could easily lead to damage. We've got high tide today at 12:47, and that's when we've got the highest risk of seeing overwash and seeing that coastal damage as well. So a tropical storm warning remains in place for the entire Maine coastline. Definitely not a day to be out on the water. Be very, very cautious if you have to be close to the ocean today. We're expecting a lot of erosion, some coastal damage. The churned up ocean waves going to be full of debris as well. So definitely not water you want to be messing around with. Breaking down the timing of the worst impacts from Lee today coming up. Katie and Dan, back to you.
All right, Christian, we'll see you in a moment. Our team coverage continues this morning with Mal Meyer. He's tracking conditions in the Portland area. Mal, it looks like you're out on the Eastern Prom. What are conditions looking like out there?
Yeah, well, Dan, I am at the top of the Eastern Prom, and of course, this is definitely a windy spot any day of the week here in Portland, but especially so right now. And this is not even the worst of it. Check out these trees behind me. You can start to see them really shake. We did notice, as Christian was saying, within the last half hour or so that the wind started to really pick up here in the city, but Christian tells me that the wind is really going to be the worst sometime after 7 o'clock. That's when it's really going to be ramping up. We could see wind gusts here in Portland anywhere between 40 and 50 miles per hour or so. I know ahead of this, the city was warning residents to remove objects from the yards, any kind of patio furniture, any kind of, grills or things like that. You definitely want to make sure that you have those secured down. I know as I was leaving the house this morning, I realized that I still had an umbrella out. You want to make sure that if you haven't, maybe go outside and make sure that those are taken down, bring them inside, or just secure them, because they do have the risk of going flying. So this was definitely a concern for the city ahead of this storm. But there could be another risk with coastal flooding, as Christian mentioned here. Of course, right now the tides are low, but the high tide is going to be after noon. And we're looking right now too. I know one of the things that the city was recommending was putting your recyclable bins away or bringing them closer to your house because they do have a risk of flying at this point. We do see one over that way. So, those are the types of things that you definitely want to make sure that you get secured down, because they could go flying. But again, we are expecting potential flooding, and I'll be talking about that coming up after 6:30. Reporting live in Portland, Mel Meyer, CBS 13 News. Dan?
All right, those winds picking up, Mal. Thanks. And to track everything Lee related, make sure and download our WGME weather app. It is free in your app store. Search for WGME WX. Right now, FEMA is in Maine, ready to help if needed with what's next.
There are definitely boots on the ground. Urban search and rescue is another layer of support that's provided. So there are resources in place in case people find themselves in a position to need rescue. And of course, all the assets that are there at the state's request are where they need to be.
This FEMA aid is available after President Biden approved Governor Janet Mills's emergency declaration request, an action which the governor is applauding. Mills says this is helping crews better prepare for any possible damage related to Lee's remnants. Maine's Emergency Management Agency is now fully activated to monitor the storm's anticipated impacts as well. And while the storm has weakened in recent days, MEMA says it's still expecting widespread damage, especially from those strong winds.
That wind field is over 300 miles long, so the state will get damages. We will lose power.
Director Rogers says MEMA has been in contact with the state's major electric utilities. They're mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer we've had, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to outages.
Now, Mainers up and down the coast are hunkered down after many spent much of the week preparing for the arrival of Lee. The outer bands of the storm could bring 40 to 60 miles an hour. 10 to 20-foot waves are also expected to cause significant beach erosion, and communities on Penobscot Bay may get the worst of those conditions. In Rockland, crews worked quickly pulling boats from the water ahead of the storm.
It's been wicked busy. We've moved about 140 boats in the past 5 days. We've done basically 6 weeks of work in 5 days.
Owners of several sailboats and smaller ships plan to keep their boats in the moorings that they have, where they'll try to ride out the storm. Homeowners we spoke with say they're most worried about those powerful winds that could topple trees and snap limbs right onto power lines.
Put the boat away, I'm going to put my roadster out back and cover that over the top and, put away the furniture and just batten down the hatches, really.
Now, several businesses in the area plan to close down for the day as well.
Clouds and rain have been the theme this summer, and the saturated ground makes trees more susceptible to wind damage. From June 1st until Thursday, the Portland Jetboard has seen nearly 19 inches of rain. Typically, that amount is 12.75, so a difference of about 7 inches. Today, winds will generally gust 40 to 50 miles an hour and will be strongest near the coast. We caught up with Chris Plant with the Tree Care Service to talk about how you can identify trees in your yard that may be susceptible to falling over.
With the amount of rain we had this year, a lot of trees have had early leaf drop. It doesn't mean that they're dead. They just had fungal issues. I wouldn't look for that per se, on a dead tree or something declining. I'm going to look for cracks or stresses that I see in the tree, branch unions, any limbs that are hanging.
He also says when it comes to full trees uprooting, it's generally the trees that are alive. Thankfully, in southern and southwestern Maine, we're not looking at much in the way of rain, but you may want to check out the trees in your yard and look for signs of stress ahead of those worst winds.
Now, if you plan to use a generator in case the power goes out today, there are a few safety tips that FEMA wants to make sure that you take. First, you should not use a generator indoors, near windows, or near open doors. That can raise the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning and fires. Make sure to install a battery-operated carbon monoxide detector so you know if levels in your home become unsafe. Now, always connect your generator to appliances with heavy-duty extension cords, and don't connect your generator directly to your home's power supply. That could increase voltage or cause a surge to outside power lines, which could hurt you or unsuspecting linemen that are fixing down power lines. Head on over to WGME.com for a full list of those safety tips.
Everyone working in Portland is making at least $21 an hour today. That's in response to the governor's state of emergency. Portland's current minimum wage is $14 an hour. Under the city's hazard pay provision put in place during COVID, people working in Portland must make at least 1.5 times the city's minimum wage during a state of emergency, or $21 an hour. The emergency minimum wage for tipped workers is $10.50 an hour plus tips. The emergency rate does not apply to anyone working remotely.
Well, just ahead on this special edition of CBS 13, travelers take note how this storm is affecting flights coming in and out of the jetport.
We're in Southport this morning where the waves are growing bigger by the second and the wind is becoming a lot gustier.
And we're heading outside. Here's a live look from our Old Port Sky Cam. Actually looks kind of calm and quiet out there, but you can see a little shaking every now and then, and we're definitely going to see those winds start to pick up in a matter of hours.
Absolutely, and we'll start to see some waves, as Emily said as well. We'll be checking in with our crews live across the state as this special edition of CBS 13 continues.
Welcome back. Many marinas in southern Maine are empty or close to it this morning. Mainers were busy getting their boats out of the water ahead of the big waves expected today.
There are limited repair facilities in Casco Bay. There are a lot of boats. We've been having an amazing couple of years with the boating industry, which means we have a lot of boats on the water. Err on the side of caution prior to these events. It is not necessarily worth the risk.
Many boaters wanted to play it safe. The big waves and gusting winds that we're expecting could cause trouble for boats not properly secure. But others decided to leave their boats in and ride out the storm.
If you are going to stay at your marina, at least make sure you're putting storm lines out, which is doubling up with a little bit bigger size. Please use a rated mooring line. Leave a little bit of slack. Let the boat ride and breathe is your best bet.
The main message, stay safe. Don't try to go out on the water or make any last-minute decisions when the weather is rough. Staying inside and taking precautions is the best course of action. And if you're planning to travel by plane today, make sure and check your flight status before heading out the door. This is a live look at the Portland Jetport's website. The latest update was posted last night. In that yellow bar at the top of the screen, it says about half of all flights scheduled for today are now canceled because of anticipated crosswinds directly out of the north. Before the most recent update, the Jetport was only expecting minimal impacts, but as you can see, that's changed. We'll keep monitoring the Jetport's website and bring you the latest updates as they come in.
Now, while Lee will impact Maine, the storm is also expected to hit southwestern Nova Scotia in full force. In Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, fishermen have brought in their boats and lashed them down with extra ropes so they withstand the strong winds and storm surge that's expected. Power crews have been out preparing for days, replacing and stabilizing guide wires in hopes that poles don't topple over. It's the first time in Nova Scotia for one couple from Washington State. They caught the last ferry from Bar Harbor before the storm.
We had to cancel our camping reservation that was on the southern coast of Nova Scotia because it was supposed to be beautiful right on the ocean. We were really looking forward to it, but it sounds like it's not really wise to be on the ocean right now.
Now, everyone in the province is being urged to stay away from the coast to avoid the possibility of dangerous storm surge.
And getting back to those winds, I don't know about you guys, but on my way in this morning, it was a little ominous. You could see some leaves, some small branches, and we're not even seeing the worst of the winds
No,
yet.
I mean, Christian, I went over the Casco Bay Bridge this morning. I mean, you can feel the crosswinds going there. You can understand why the Jetport is probably going to have some significant impacts throughout the day.
Yeah, that's right. I was going over the 295 bridge, crossing over onto Washington Avenue this morning. Same deal, that open, exposed space. Yeah, I definitely had to hold the steering wheel a little tighter this morning, so definitely not great driving weather. A great day to just stay home if you can. We're very lucky. The worst of this storm is impacting us on a Saturday. So let's take a look at our current coastal flood alerts. Luckily, because Lee is tracking further to the east, we are not going to see major coastal flooding here in southern Maine. Certainly could be some damage from the big waves, but looks like that coastal flood threat is in place for far down east Maine. Hancock and Washington counties here in the far down east portion of the state. Notice does include Acadia, Bar Harbor. I know a lot of campsites and stuff there are closed due to those big waves. And you can see already wave heights have really quickly picked up at the Portland buoy, already reporting waves of 6 feet. Notice out in the Gulf of Maine, though, approaching and exceeding 10-foot wave heights as of right now. And we're going to continue to see those picking up, peaking around 20 feet later this morning and into the early afternoon. Winds have also remained gusty, still gusting right around 30 miles per hour. We'll again continue to see those picking up through the morning, especially over the next couple hours. We'll really start to notice those winds. So here's a look at our peak wind gusts. Most of us will see gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour. York County through greater Portland, up into the foothills, over towards Lewiston, Auburn, and Augusta. From the mid-coast eastward to down east Maine, 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts look pretty likely. Could even see some isolated spots seeing stronger gusts, especially in the offshore islands here along the mid-coast and down east coast. So let's track out the rain from Lee. Again, it's going to be a very dry storm. Here we are at 1:30 this afternoon. Already at this point, we could be seeing the sun poking out in western Maine with winds still gusting up to 50 miles per hour. So it might be sunny, but it will be extraordinarily windy out there this afternoon. We'll continue to see things gradually clearing out. In fact, models pointing towards a slightly warmer day due to that sunshine coming out. We might hit the low 70s this afternoon in some towns. And again, rain only really a concern for far down east Maine. It looks like a lot of us going to be very dry for much of the day today. Clearing out overnight tonight, much quieter tomorrow. Sunday is a great day for cleanup and getting anything that you want done tomorrow this weekend because it's going to be so much nicer out there. High temperatures approaching 80 and it will be sunny. It will be dry. It will be very nice out there for our Sunday. So at least we get a really good cleanup day for tomorrow. So let's track out those peak winds. You can see as we head towards the late morning, that's likely when we're going to see the peak winds, right before lunchtime or so. That's what models have been showing as when we'll likely see those highest wind gusts, again, between 40 and 50 miles per hour for most. Over in the mid-coast, though, could see gusts approaching or exceeding 60 miles per hour. So that's why we do have that widespread power outage threat mid-coast and down east Maine. Slightly lower power outage threat for the rest of us just because winds will be a little weaker, but still, we could easily see widespread outages with those kind of winds. Winds do die down by this evening. By tonight, much quieter. Again, tomorrow looks like a just much better day in every regard. Going to be a very calm and quiet Sunday. Let's talk about those waves, though. Again, they're going to continue to pick up as well, likely peaking, unfortunately, around midday. High tide, 12:47 p.m. And we've got these 15 to 20-foot waves slamming into the coastline at high tide. Recipe for damage. I know Fort Preble here in South Portland was damaged during that pre-Christmas storm down or last year in December, and this year could see very similar impacts from that today, from those big waves. So just be aware of that. Definitely a good idea to stay away from the ocean and, of course, causing erosion as well along the beaches. The good news is the waves do die down tonight in every way. Again, Sunday looking much better. Rainfall, not a concern here. Down east Maine could see a couple inches. notice for most of us, a 1/10 of an inch of rain maybe in Portland, most of us not getting a ton of rain. So at least that helps to not add more moisture because we really just couldn't handle any more heavy rain across the state. Breaking down more of Lee's impacts coming up. Katie and Dan, back to you.
Christian, thanks so much. And our team coverage continues with Emily Santom, who is live right now at the New Wagon Town Landing in Southport. Emily, looks like the winds are picking up there.
Hi, Katie. It is very windy here. It's pretty windy just without the gusts in general. There are some really, oh, there it is. There's the wind. There's some pretty big waves out there too. We're looking around 15 feet, as Christian was saying. They keep on crashing on the rocks. Couple of loons in the water as well. They are staying safe, I guess, by not swimming around. They can't really swim around because of the wind as well. We're really just looking for wind for today for local power outages as well. It's raining here and it will be raining in this area for the rest of the day as well. Overall, what I'm really fighting with is the wind out here. It's pretty windy. I've had to grab my hat a few times, but oh, there's our next gust again. Overall, we're just watching the waves, fighting the wind out here, having a good old time. But really, we're just looking for waves for later today, especially during high tide, which is just around lunchtime today, as Christian said. But overall, it's looking pretty good out here. Just a little bit of wind. It's on the water, top of the water, I should say, as well. Still raining, like I said. We'll see it rain throughout the day. But other than that, we're just hanging out in the wind, watching the waves. We're expecting the waves to climb later today, as some areas are projected to see 20-foot, 25-foot waves out in the Gulf. So I'm going to send it back to you guys. Other than that, just we got rain, waves, and wind out here.
All right, Emily, stay safe out there. We'll check back in soon. Right now, every campground in Acadia National Park is closed down. Like our cruise park officials say, they've been tracking the weather for several days. They expect trees could come down throughout the park, and it might not be possible for emergency crews to reach anyone who needs help. They say it's also possible waves could crash over some of the areas along Park Loop Road and wash people out into the ocean, which we saw back in 2009 from the edges of Hurricane Bill. So that entire one-way section of the Park Loop Road is closed right now. The same thing is being done for any area that could become dangerous.
Our primary concern is making sure that visitors and our staff have the tools that they need to stay safe during the storm.
People can stay up to date about park closures and reopenings by heading to their website. Checking in on Down East Maine, the shores of Winter Harbor are very quiet. Restaurants have deck furniture tied down and boats up on land. In Lemoyne, the fire department has generators and clean water standing by. They say they're ready for anything, which for them is business as usual.
Made sure that all the equipment was operating. That includes generators, chainsaws, pumps. We have several sump pumps if people's basements get flooded.
In Machias, the University of Maine campus has been fully evacuated of all faculty, staff, and students. The school will be closed throughout the day today. And right now, CMP is reporting around 350 outages. Customers seeing the most are in Knox, Penobscot, and Waldo County. Versant Power is reporting outages, around 5,000 customers without power. We'll continue to track both companies throughout the day, both online and on the air. Coming up on Good Day Maine on CBS 13, all hands on deck. How many crews CMP has to deal with those outages? Plus, stay away from the waves. Why the pass should tell you to steer clear of the beaches right now.
Welcome back. We are continuing our coverage of Hurricane Lee and its impacts across the state. Of course, no longer a hurricane, but no change to impacts. We were expecting it to transition into that nor'easter-style storm. Let's take a live look up in the Mid-Coast at the Marshall Point Lighthouse. Of course, the tide is fairly low right now, so there's not a whole lot going on here. But as it comes in later this morning, I bet we will see this water come all the way up underneath this lighthouse here. And of course, the wave action really going to start to pick up as well. Unfortunately, it's not a live cam. It's only updating an image about every 30 seconds or so. But of course, last night, if you were up, wow, what a sunset. The entirety of New England on the western edge of Lee, we got an incredible sunset. I saw it from downtown Portland yesterday, up and down the Maine coast. It was beautiful. Here's a picture from Steve Train out in Casco Bay last night on Long Island, I want to say. Beautiful, beautiful sunset pre-Lee yesterday evening. And of course, we're continuing to track the storm. You can see the rain bands from it overspreading the state. The winds continuing to increase here through the rest of the morning hours. We'll have details on the timing of that coming up. Dan, back over to you.
See in a few. Well, even a hurricane that stays well off the coast can lead to unexpected devastation and danger. You might remember back in 2009 when a rogue wave kicked up by Hurricane Bill slammed into spectators at Acadia National Park. Now, hundreds of people turned out to watch the waves, but when the big one hit, more than a dozen people were dragged into the ocean. This is video of them being rescued, and one of them, a 7-year-old girl, died as a result of that. A rogue wave happens when a series of smaller waves combine. They can be 3 to 4 times larger than normal waves, and it's another reason why experts say to be wary and stay back during dangerous surf. Now, one group of Mainers facing even more uncertainty as the remnants of Lee bear down on the state is those living on the streets of Portland in tents.
I ain't got no place to go. There's a hurricane coming in. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Now, stop the sweeps was the message echoed by a crowd of people who gathered on the front steps of Portland City Hall last night. They're protesting the city's removal of encampments, which the city has been ramping up in recent months. The rally's organizers say shelter is the main issue, and clearing out the encampments is only making things worse.
They need to be advocating for real solutions along with housing first, and also acknowledging that shelters are not solutions, they're Band-Aids.
You cannot work on anything else in your life when your shelter is being impeded. So the first issue that needs to be taken care of is a person needs to be under a roof.
City leaders said they had a plan in place to help the unhoused ahead of Lee, and that they would be working behind the scenes to offer some protections. Well, coming up on this special edition of CBS 13, getting ready for the worst, the preparations that hospitals have made so Lee doesn't catch them off guard. Well, we'll check in with Mel Meyer there in a few minutes. He's live on the Eastern Prom. We're taking a live look from our rooftop sky cam here. The wind and rain starting to move in as the remnants of Lee approaches the state. We'll have plenty more on this special edition of CBS 13 still ahead.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on CBS 13 as we continue to track Lee.
Earlier this morning, its classification got changed from a hurricane to a post-tropical cyclone. We've got our team coverage this morning on the conditions it's bringing into our state.
First, let's bring in meteorologist Christian Bridges. And Christian, this storm is doing exactly what we expected over the past couple of days.
Yeah, that's right, Katie. We're still going to see those big wind and wave impacts out there. Already starting to see wind gusts picking up now. And we're starting to see those first few gusts to tropical storm force across the state. So here's a live look up in the mid-coast, one of the areas most likely to be hit hardest by this storm. Pemaquid Point Lighthouse, you can see the waves and the ocean pretty churned up out there. Likely to really see these waves picking up late this morning as that high tide comes in and potentially even splashing all the way up over the lighthouse here later on today. So we'll be watching this camera really closely. You can see on our satellite and radar the bands from Lee rotating on into the state. Now, as winds continue to shift more and more out of the north here, it's going to shut off the rain. It's going to be downsloping dry air over the mountains here. So it's really going to keep us pretty dry out there for most of us later this afternoon, really from the mid-coast westward to New Hampshire. Not going to see a ton of rainfall here. So that's one bit of positive news with Lee. It's just not a super wet storm. So let's take a look at our current wind gusts again. Mentioned that we're starting to see those gusts approaching tropical storm force. Bangor above tropical storm force, gusting to 41 miles per hour. Augusta gusting to 31 mile per hour gust here in Portland. And as we zoom in around Casco Bay here, wind gusts for the most part remaining pretty tame as of right now, unless you're along the very immediate coastline. So again, going to continue to see these winds picking up, especially over the next hour or so. We'll really start to see a noticeable increase in the wind speeds. So here's the current stats on Lee. Again, transition into a post-tropical storm, basically a nor'easter. Every nor'easter is also technically a post-tropical storm. They just weren't a hurricane beforehand. So Lee now a nor'easter, but notice the winds, 80 gusting to 100 offshore. So no real changes to its intensity. It's just a designation change here. Look at the quick speed too, moving north at 25 miles per hour. Going to continue to move north, likely making its landfall in Nova Scotia within the next 30 minutes to an hour here, and then continuing to move to the north and east and moving offshore of North America here over the next few days. So here's a look at our expected wind gusts in the Portland area. Again, winds gusting up to 40 or over 40 miles per hour through the early afternoon. Could easily see some gusts approaching 50 miles per hour. Notice by the evening, though, things do begin to die on down. And again, our biggest impacts this morning through early evening, wind gusts 40 to 50 for most, could be some higher ones mid-coast to down east. And of course, we've got those coastal concerns with the huge waves as well. Breaking all of the timing for this down coming up. Katie and Dan, back to you.
Christian, thank you. Our team coverage continues now. We're checking back in with Mal Meyer, who is live in Portland by East End Beach. And Mal, I hope you can hear me. I know you were saying the winds are whipping.
Yeah, it has definitely picked up within the last half hour or so, and it's only going to get worse from here. But I do have this wind gauge with me, and I'm going to show you a little something right here, because we've been seeing these wind gusts get up to about 15 miles per hour or so. But as we just heard from meteorologist Christian Bridges, really the worst of it is going to be coming after 7 a.m. today. But ooh, here comes another one. And it's looking like we're reaching about 21 miles per hour on this gauge. So it's only going to get worse from here. And I know Christian was telling me that we could see wind gusts about 40 to 50 miles per hour in Portland. I'm going to show you the boats behind me are really rocking out there. And of course, this was a big concern for Portland leaders ahead of the storm, just encouraging everybody to make sure that they secure their belongings outside, any kind of patio furniture or things like that. Now, the other concern for Portland leaders was the potential for coastal flooding, there, especially in our low-lying areas and problem spots near the waterfront. City officials will be barricading any streets that are flooded. And as a reminder, you should never drive through any kind of floodwaters. That's because you don't know how truly deep they are or what kind of damage might be below. That is always a concern with these kinds of storms, that people will continue to go around those barricades and put themselves and others at risk. So if we do see flooding, though, it should be later on today. Right now, we're actually at low tide. The high tide is going to be coming up at about 12:47, I saw on the tide chart. So we should expect that sometime later on today, of course, in those problem areas that we typically see around the city, but we'll know a little bit closer to that high tide. Reporting live in Portland, Mel Meyer, CBS 13 News. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Mal, thanks. Well, again, stay up to date on all the latest conditions that Lee is bringing into Maine by downloading our free WGME weather app. Just search WGME WX in your phone's app store. Maine's emergency declaration gives the federal government permission to assist the state now and after this storm hit. Before and after this storm hits. That and coming into the form of mass care, evacuation, shelter support as well. FEMA told us on Friday that agents were setting up, all hands on deck, standing by for this morning.
FEMA is there in a support role, but we want to make sure that the localities, the counties, any tribal areas, all have what they need, and they're the lead right now. So we're going to give them all the support they need to ensure that residents have the information.
Now, FEMA is urging Mainers to be prepared, having a kit ready to go, your phone charged, as well as water stored. You can head to WGME.com for information on where emergency shelters are being set up. That's a story we'll be updating throughout the day as conditions continue to change. Governor Janet Mills says that federal declaration helps Maine be more proactive in its response, not just left dealing with the after effects.
Stages them more quickly. We don't have to wait till after a storm occurs and then ask for help. We did this preemptively for good reason, so that we'll be prepared ahead of time before damage occurs.
Now, while the storm has weakened in recent days, MEMA is still prepared for widespread damage, especially from strong winds. Director Peter Rogers says they've been in contact with the state's major electric utilities, which are mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer that we've seen, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to outages.
The other piece is the trees are full canopies right now. They have all the leaves on the trees, the roots and the ground is soft. So pretty much the whole state is in that same situation. The winds will be stronger on the coast, but as you probably saw, they are going to start moving inland too. So, that's why we looked at having the whole state declaration.
Now, MEMA is in full activation throughout the weekend, bringing multiple state agencies together to monitor Lee's latest path and impacts.
People up and down the coast spent the past week preparing for this storm, especially in the past 48 hours. That's certainly the case for communities on Penobscot Bay like Rockland, which is expected to get hit hard by the heavy winds. A number of homeowners in the town are worried about power outages that could stem from toppling trees. That's the same concern for residents in Owl's Head, who are also worried about damage from heavy waves. But after taking precautions, some we spoke with say they're ready.
I know some of it's pushing out to sea, but we'll get hit with some rain, but it's nothing we can't handle. I mean, brand new buildings here, and just gotta shut the doors, lock them up. They'll be all right.
Several businesses in the area have closed down for the day, rescheduling some Saturday events for tomorrow when the weather is supposed to drastically clear up.
Both power crews and the Coast Guard took massive preparations over the past week to get ready up and down the coast. The U.S. Coast Guard says its top priority is safety on the water. They will have search and rescue crews ready to respond 24/7 in case of an emergency. The Coast Guard also made sure the maritime transportation system is clear of any debris like oil spills or pollution when it reopens to traffic after the storm. Central Maine Power says the high winds could be a challenge for them. In fact, outages are among the biggest concern with this storm, and they've also brought in extra crews.
We have around 400 to 500 crews coming in really from across the eastern seaboard as north as Canada.
CMP says they're monitoring the forecast to see where the winds may hit the hardest in the region's most vulnerable areas, sending crews and staging them out to where they think the most damage will be. They add they're also using sandbags in vulnerable areas because of potential coastal flooding.
And we're checking back in on those power outages. CMP right now reporting around 450 outages. Customers seeing the most are in Knox, Penobscot, and Waldo counties. Versant Power is also reporting outages with around 2,500 customers currently impacted. We'll keep tracking both companies throughout the morning and all day, both online and on the air. Hospitals across the state taking steps to prepare for Lee as well. At Northern Light Health Hospitals, they tested all generators and made sure they have enough fuel. The hospitals also stocked up on more materials. Hospital staff say they've prepared for situations like this and will be ready to serve patients throughout the storm.
We've been working very hard to ensure that our hospitals and all the various services that we offer will be here, they'll be open, they'll be safe, and they'll continue to deliver the very high quality care that we've been known for.
He also says they'll be ready to respond to whatever conditions end up hitting Maine.
Well, still to come on this special edition of CBS 13, keeping us safe from the skies. How a group of NOAA researchers and scientists are tracking all of the latest conditions of Lee from right above the storm.
Live in Southport, we're fighting the wind and watching the waves grow larger by the second.
Those winds are picking up out there. This is a live look from our rooftop sky cam in Portland. Not quite as windy out there right now. And we are going to see those strongest winds right around 2 p.m. or so this afternoon. So we still have a few more hours before we get there.
A lot more to come with the remnants of what was a major hurricane off our coast. We'll have more of our special edition of CBS 13 coming up after this. Well, welcome back. Governor Mills and the Maine Emergency Management Agency are urging Mainers to be prepared for all of Hurricane Lee's potential impacts. MEMA says they're closely monitoring the hurricane's track and coordinating with safety officials across the state. In the meantime, they're offering some tips for you on how to prepare.
If you don't have an alternate source of power, then keep that in mind when you're choosing the food that you buy this week, or if you know that your refrigerator may not be working, you need food that you don't need to cook. You should also have a gallon of water per person per day, and don't forget about pets.
Now, officials also say you should be keeping cell phones, devices charged in case of a power outage, and having emergency kits that have supplies that can last for several days. And remember, forecasts can always change, so make sure to stay up to date. Our Emily Santom is monitoring those changing conditions right now. She's live on Southport Island. And Emily, the wind out there just seems to be getting even stronger.
Hi, Dan. The wind is pretty strong here. We're in Southport. One thing I can say is that it stopped raining parts of Midcoast and down East Maine. We'll see the majority of the rain today, not more so parts of Western Maine. But really what we're fighting out here is the wind. I'm thinking gusts between 40 to 50 miles per hour. If you take a look, too, the waves are crashing against the rocks. They're also growing larger by the second. We're looking at either between 15 to 20-foot waves today, especially along the rocks. And we're looking at this island right here next to this red house. And I'm going to be watching those trees for today as well, see if I can catch any of them falling, as wind gusts are going to be on the higher side. What's really not great as well is that the soil's so saturated. So it's going to be hard for the trees to stay in the ground, as they'll be fighting the roots will be fighting the soil. So that's really what we're going to lead to power outages for today. Now I'm going to send it back to you guys. It's pretty windy out here in Southport. I'm CBS 13 meteorologist Emily Santom. Back to you.
Yeah, pretty amazing to hear the wind too. Those microphones have windscreens on them,
do.
and you can still really hear the winds whipping.
The good thing with this storm, though, Christian, we're not getting as much rain as we could have had with a major storm like this. And the amount of rain we've already had this summer, I mean, that's a good thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Tropical cyclones, notorious heavy rain producers. Yeah. We're luckily avoiding a lot of that. And also a big benefit is that the wind is offshore too. So it's not accentuating those waves and making coastal flood concerns even worse. It'll actually help to temper it down a little bit and keep the coastal flood threat a little bit lower. But notice in the Gulf of Maine now, pretty much every buoy reporting tropical storm force winds. Look at this gust of 56 miles per hour offshore. Jonesport buoy far down East Maine gusting to 54, and all along the mid-coast gusting to 40 to 45 miles per hour. Even the Portland buoy out in Casco Bay gusting to 45 miles per hour. So easy to see why we do have those tropical storm warnings up and down the entire Maine coastline, also including the offshore waters as well. It does extend inland up to places like Lewiston, Auburn, Augusta, towards Bangor, and into, of course, far down East Maine. Now, we also do have some coastal flood concerns far down East Maine, Hancock and Washington counties. We've got that coastal flood warning that goes through the day today for the immediate coastline. That does also include Acadia National Park, Mount Desert Island as well. So easy to see why there's been a lot of closings and cancellations in Acadia National Park. So let's take a look at some of our wave heights. Again, they continue to gradually build, and they'll continue to do that through the morning. The Gulf of Maine now reporting wave heights around 12 feet, and up in the far down east coast already at or above 10-foot wave heights. And again, they'll approach 20 feet by the time we get into the early afternoon. In terms of peak winds, it's going to be mid-coast and down East Maine from the Brunswick to Wiscasset area eastward. That's where we could see winds gusting 50 to 60 miles per hour, even higher, especially in the offshore islands, Monhegan, places like that could easily see gusts much stronger. Now, if you're further inland, a little bit less of a major wind threat here, but we're still going to see power outage causing winds easily. 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts Freiburg through the Lakes region, over towards Lewiston, Auburn, through Franklin, Oxford, and Somerset counties, and down into greater Portland as well as down into York County, including all of coastal York County. So even though it may not even be all that rainy this afternoon, the wind's not going to care about that. It's still going to be very windy all through the day today. So let's take a look at our storm tracker here. Again, the rain tapers off very quickly. We're pretty much done with a lot of the rain here in central, southern, and far western Maine. Could even see some peaks of sunshine as early afternoon, and we'll continue to gradually see the sun poking out more and more by the evening. So also, at least our sky conditions not too bad here, and of course the rain not a big threat outside of down East Maine. Far down East Maine could still see some flooding from heavy rainfall. By tomorrow, it's beautiful, sunny, nice, dry, much calmer, perfect weather for cleaning up after the storm if we do have a lot of damage across the state. And then we're pretty quiet next week as well. So some great weather here for clean up. All right, let's talk about the winds. They're going to continue to ramp up through this morning, especially late morning, early afternoon. That's likely when we're going to see the worst of the winds here, gusting up to 50 miles per hour, places like Portland through York County, up towards Lewiston, Augusta, Bangor, down towards the mid-coast and down East Maine. That's where we can easily see gusts at or above 60 miles per hour. Now notice by late afternoon, winds are beginning to taper off here. So here we are, 4:30, not going to be as bad out there, and we'll continue to see the winds dying down heading into the evening. Again, tomorrow, calmer in every way in terms of waves, winds, rain, sky conditions. It's going to be a much better day on Sunday. Again, the waves continuing to pick up here. We'll see wave heights approaching 20 feet, maybe even some 25-foot waves, at least offshore. So that's why we do have that big risk of coastal damage. High tide, 12:47 p.m. in Portland, around then up and down the Maine coastline. And that's when we do have that highest risk of seeing damage or overwash from those huge, powerful waves slamming into the coastline here. Good news is, again, waves will die down as we head into tonight and into Sunday, looking much calmer out there Sunday. And again, rain, not a big concern here outside of far down East Maine, where we could see a couple inches for most of us. A very dry day today. We'll likely see more sun than rain in some parts of western Maine. So again, we're going to keep you updated on the current wind gusts and with Lee, and of course the power outages as well as we head through the rest of this morning. Dan and Katie, back over to you.
Christian, thank you. People in South Portland are concerned about an osprey that hasn't migrated yet. Mainers in the area are keeping a very close eye on the pier near SMCC. Some witnesses say it appears some of her family has already left. One wildlife photographer doesn't think the storm will force her out. It's up to her.
There's a switch that's going to go off in her head that's going to tell her it's time to leave. The fortunate thing about it, if she heads down the Atlantic coast, she'll be on the west side of the storm. And since the storm rotates counterclockwise, she should have one heck of a tailwind to help her.
He says her nest looks secure and it would take a lot to blow it down.
As Lee hits New England with strong winds, hurricane hunters are tracking the storm up close. Our Gary Touchman joined one of those teams aboard a jet high above the Atlantic Ocean.
The Gulfstream 4 is typically a business jet, but this one is reconfigured. And its business is to help protect lives. These are the hurricane hunters, 8 scientists, engineers, pilots. They work for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, known as NOAA. Paul Flaherty is the flight director and a flight meteorologist.
We want to make sure we're collecting data in data sparse areas in which there's currently no data available, or very little data available, for the weather models to use to make forecasts.
For this mission, this aircraft flies at altitudes between 41 and 45,000 feet. It travels around 500 miles per hour. This is essentially a flying weather station, a weather station that goes to the weather. The men and women of the NOAA Corps will fly in this high-altitude reconnaissance jet, above, below, around, and in front of Hurricane Lee.
I think for now we'll be fine, but
yeah, looks like plenty of space to maneuver around things.
After the jet leaves Lakeland, Florida, skies are clear. At this high altitude, you can clearly see storm-churned whitecaps in the ocean. It doesn't take long, though, for the sunshine to disappear. The flight gets turbulent as Hurricane Lee lurks ominously below us. All the while, science is taking place. This screen shows 34 locations where a tube, known as a drop sonde, or sonde, will be dropped out of the plane.
So this is the next drop sonde that's going to be dropped. Rebecca Keller, NOAA engineer. What is in the drop sonde?
So the drop sonde consists of a sensor, and we have a circuit board inside as well as a battery. And the sensor is picking up humidity, air temperature, pressure, wind direction, and wind speed.
And about every 10 minutes, another drop sonde with a parachute that is deployed is launched to the ground. Along with the sondes, the plane also has radar in its nose, Doppler radar in its tail, and 2 pilots up front, flying with a deep sense of purpose.
I joined the NOAA Corps, as did all of my counterparts, because we love to serve our country. We care about the citizens, and so it's really rewarding to know that I am like right at the front lines and risking my life in order to help the lives of everyone else that are back home.
Now that plane heads back to Florida at night so the crew can get some rest before flying back into the heart of Lee in the morning.
Still to come on Good Day Maine, the storm hurting Maine's most iconic industry, why Lee is just the latest hurdle in a rough summer for lobstermen.
And we're taking a live look at the Rockport Breakwater. We're told it's closed today. It's a place that a lot of people usually go out and see the high surf, but obviously with this storm, extremely dangerous to do that.
Not a good idea. And a quick update on those outages, just checking CMP's website. They're at, what, about 4,500 right now?
4,500 right now. I know in the next hour, we're going to be speaking with CMP, so we'll get an update from them on where restoration efforts stand.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. We are continuing to track Hurricane Lee and its impacts across the state this morning. Here's a live look up at the Marshall Point Lighthouse. Again, Mid-Coast Maine likely to be one of the harder hit parts of the state. And you can see it does definitely not look the prettiest out there this morning as, again, we're seeing those winds picking up and those waves picking up as well. So here's a current look at Lee. There's the center of it right about there. About to move into Nova Scotia this morning. You can see the rain continuing to move into the state as well. And I've got storm reports popped up on here. So far not seeing any, but I am just noticing far down East Maine, seeing our first storm report here across the state. We're likely to see this map, a bunch of them starting to pop up here as we head later on into the morning. Again, rain, not the big concern. It's the wind and it's the waves. So let's talk about the wind. Currently gusting upwards of 30 miles per hour. Augusta now gusting up to 35 miles per hour. Most of us still, though, below tropical storm range outside of far eastern Maine. I saw Bangor still gusting to 40 miles per hour. Again, we're going to continue to track this through the rest of the morning. Dan and Katie, back to you.
All right, Christian. Well, as we reported this morning, businesses across the state are hunkering down, taking precautions ahead of Lee. That includes lobstermen who've been hitting the water ahead of the storm to secure their assets.
I've taken up half my traps and shifted the other half inside into Pigeon Hill Bay, hoping for some cover while this hurricane hits. I've taken up 120 in the last 3 days, but I still have 120 out there right now. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I haven't been fishing too long, but I've been fishing long enough to know that 70, 80 mile an hour winds in here, 20, 25 foot seas is not going to be very good.
Well, this comes at the end of the rough season for lobstermen, as well as other businesses who rely on the summer rush. From fog to all the rain that we've seen this summer, Lee is just a cap on what's been an underwhelming few months.
And finally, this hour, the storm has brought in a lot of trouble for many Mainers. So we want to take a second and appreciate the calm that came before it.
Yeah, last night there was some incredible sunset ahead of today's rough weather, and we got some amazing pictures sent in from some of our viewers.
We did, and some of you guys took some good ones as well. For this one from Russell, who caught this gorgeous shot. It looks like the bridge there in the background. I mean, it's a postcard.
Oh, it's absolutely stunning. And Lori was at the Field of Dreams game at Hadlock last night.
Wow, that is amazing.
The sky looking so magical. And we were all kind of saying, you know, we saw sort of a glow and you could kind of sense it was going to be a beautiful sunset. Then it built up, right?
Yep.
And those clouds, I mean, it was, I think, the sunset of the year.
It might have been,
You know?
Pre-hurricane sunsets tend to be absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, that was one of the best sunsets of my life,
And
I've
I'm
got to say.
so glad the Sea Dogs were able to get in their
So
last
glad.
home game of the season.
Yes.
Right, they squeezed
it in.
They really did. Well, here's a live look outside. If you are heading out on the roads, take it easy and be prepared for some strong winds.
We'll have more CBS 13 special coverage coming up at 7 o'clock and have updates on power outages as well.
Special Weather Authority storm coverage is sponsored by Casco Bay Generators.
After weeks of preparations, Lee is finally here. Thanks for joining us on this special broadcast on CBS 13. I'm Katie Sampson.
And I'm Dan Lamparello. Within the last few hours, Lee is no longer a hurricane, now just a post-tropical cyclone. But many Mainers will still feel a big impact. We have special team coverage this morning on all things storm-related. Our Mal Meyer will join us in just a few moments from Portland, where winds are starting to pick up, and meteorologist Emily Santom a little bit later from Southport.
But first, because the worst of the storm is yet to come, let's check in now with meteorologist Christian Bridges. Christian, you're keeping a very close eye on Lee and seeing when it's going to make landfall.
Yeah, that's right, you guys. And yeah, we're seeing those winds picking up out there this morning, and we're going to continue to see the waves along the coastline picking up as well. It's the winds, it's the waves. Those are our biggest threats today, again, with that big power outage potential and that threat of coastal damage as well, as those huge waves slam into the coastline. So let's get a look at Lee right now. It is offshore. It's about to move into Nova Scotia this morning. You can see it is no longer a hurricane, but still, of course, bringing us some big impacts here across the state. So yeah, we're really starting to see those winds pick up. There's some rain there as well, and we have our first damage report from far down east Maine. Some trees starting to fall in the far down east portion of the state. We'll continue to see those sort of impacts spreading further westward and southward as we head through the morning. So let's take a look at our current wind gusts. Most of us gusting up to 30 miles per hour, 35 mile per hour gusts in Augusta, gusting to 40 in Bangor. That is tropical storm force there. Seeing the winds picking up here over the past hour or so. That will continue over the next couple hours. So again, Lee, no longer a hurricane, no longer a tropical cyclone, but it is still a very powerful, essentially nor'easter that is sitting off the coastline. Now notice there's the center of it right there, about to move onto Nova Scotia here over the next hour or two. So we're going to continue to see it moving to the north, making a turn to the northeast as it quickly moves away from us here at 25 miles per hour. But again, conditions continuing to go downhill through the rest of this morning. So 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. today, that's likely when we're seeing the worst of it. Wind gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour. Could even see some 60 plus mile per hour gusts in mid-coast and down east Maine. Again, we've got that big coastal concern with 10 to 20 foot waves along the coastline. Wave heights are already approaching or exceeding 10 feet in many spots. And in terms of winds here in the Portland area, at least, picking up through the morning, gusting up towards 40 miles per hour, even 50 miles per hour, late morning, early afternoon, and then gradually tapering off from there as we head to the evening. Much calmer winds by the time we get into the day tomorrow. So again, winds right now gusting close to 40 miles per hour. Offshore, winds are even stronger, gusting up to 50 miles per hour, 54 mile per hour gust out in one of our buoys in the Gulf of Maine. Portland buoy gusting close to 50 miles per hour, and up and down the coastline, seeing gusts at least up to 40 miles per hour, if not higher. Penobscot Bay seeing gusts up to 43, 45 on the eastern Maine shelf. Jonesport, far down east Maine, seeing a gust to 54 as well. So definitely seeing those tropical storm conditions offshore, and we will likely continue to see a ramp up of the winds onshore as well here over the next couple hours. Again, tropical storm warnings in place up and down the entire Maine coastline and our offshore waters. Also further inland, Lewiston, Auburn towards Augusta, down towards the Bangor area and into far down east Maine as well. Tracking out all of our threats with Lee and the timing coming up. Dan and Katie, back to you.
All right, Christian, we'll check back in with you in a bit. Our team coverage continues this morning with Mal Meyer. He's tracking conditions in the Portland area this morning. And Mal, looks like you're still out on the Eastern Prom there. What are conditions like now?
Yes, Dan, that's right. I'm up at the top of the Eastern Prom at Fort Allen Park. And really right now, at least where we're situated, the winds seem to have calmed down just a little bit. Right now, we are getting a little bit of drizzle. That's happened within the last half hour or so. It has been coming down here and there throughout the morning, but definitely within the last 15 minutes or so, and that rain has started to pick up. But the real big issue here in Portland today is going to be that wind. Take a look behind me. You can see the flags fluttering in the breeze right now. Again, not too much, at least where we're positioned up here in terms of the wind gusts. I know just a short time ago when we were down by East End Beach, we did record some wind gusts of about 20 or 21 miles per hour or so. Meteorologist Christian Bridges tells me, though, the wind is really going to be the worst sometime after 7 o'clock, which is right now. So it's going to be picking up here, and we could see wind gusts anywhere from 40 to 50 miles per hour. Now, we are seeing a lot of people walking out and about here in the park, potentially getting in one last run or dog walk before the worst of the storm, though. I did just talk to a guy a short time ago who thought that the worst of the storm was already over, but that is definitely not the case. It's going to be picking up here and continuing throughout the day. Now, if you haven't done so already, you may want to go outside before the winds do really start picking up, and make sure you secure any of your belongings. That's what city officials were warning ahead of the storm, to tie down any loose objects, any kind of patio furniture or recycling bins, things that could be blown around in the wind. I'm going to do a wind gust check here right now with my little wind meter, and not much in terms, again, of where we are. Only a few miles per hour here. It's considerably less windy up here in this part of the Eastern Prom. So we'll check in with you guys in about another half hour or so with what the current conditions are looking like then. Reporting live in Portland, Mel Meyer, CBS 13 News. Dan?
All right, Mal, the worst yet to come. And to track everything Lee related, download our WGME weather app. It is free in your phone's app store. Search for WGME WX. Right now, FEMA is in Maine, ready to help if needed with what's next.
There are definitely boots on the ground. Urban search and rescue is another layer of support that's provided. So there are resources in place in case people find themselves in a position to need rescue. And of course, all the assets that are there at the state's request are where they need to be.
This FEMA aid is available after President Biden approved the governor's emergency declaration request, an action which the governor is applauding. Governor Mills says this is helping crews better prepare for any possible damage related to Lee's remnants. Maine's emergency management agency is now fully activated to monitor the storm's anticipated impacts as well. And while the storm has weakened in recent days, FEMA says it's still expecting widespread damage, especially from those strong winds.
That wind field is over 300 miles long, so the state will get damages. We will lose power.
Director Rogers says MEMA has been in contact with the state's major electric utilities. They're mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer we've had, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to outages.
Now, Mainers up and down the coast are hunkered down this morning after many spent much of the week preparing for the arrival of Lee. The outer bands of the storm could, as Christian said, bring 40 to 60 mile an hour winds. 10 to 20 foot waves are also expected to cause some significant beach erosion along the coast. And communities on Penobscot Bay may get the worst of those conditions. In Rockland, crews worked quickly, pulling boats from the water ahead of this storm.
It's been wicked busy. We've moved about 140 boats in the past 5 days. We've done basically 6 weeks of work in 5 days.
Now, owners of several sailboats and smaller vessels plan to keep their boats on their moorings and while they try to ride out the storm. Homeowners we spoke with say they're most worried about those powerful winds and what they could do to topple trees and snap limbs right onto power lines.
Put the boat away, and I'm going to put my roadster out back and cover that over the top and, put away the furniture and just batten down the hatches, really.
Now, several businesses in the area also say they plan to close down for the day as well.
Clouds and rain have been the theme this summer, and the saturated ground makes trees more susceptible to wind damage. From June 1st until Thursday, the Portland Jet Board has seen nearly 19 inches of rain. Typically, that amount is 12.75, so a difference of about 6 or 7 inches. Today, winds will generally gust 40 to 50 miles an hour and will be strongest near the coast. We caught up with Chris Plant with the Tree Care Service to talk about how you can identify trees in your yard that may be susceptible to falling over.
With the amount of rain we had this year, a lot of trees have had early leaf drop. It doesn't mean that they're dead. They just had fungal issues. I wouldn't look for that per se, on a dead tree or something declining. I'm going to look for cracks or stresses that I see in the tree, branch unions, any limbs that are hanging.
He also says when it comes to full trees uprooting, it's generally the trees that are alive. Thankfully, in southern and southwestern Maine, we're not looking at much in the way of rain. But you may want to check out the trees in your yard and look for signs of stress ahead of the worst winds.
Now, if you do plan on using a generator in case the power goes out today, there are a few safety tips that FEMA wants you to make sure you take. First, don't use a generator indoors or near windows or near open doors. That can raise the risk of carbon monoxide poisoning as well as the risk of fires. Make sure to install a battery-operated carbon monoxide detector so you know if the levels in your home become unsafe. Always connect your generator to your appliances with heavy-duty extension cords, and don't connect your generator directly to your home's power supply. That could increase voltage or cause a power surge to outside power lines, which could hurt you or unsuspecting linemen who may be making repairs. Head on over to WGME.com for a full list of safety tips.
Everyone working in Portland is making at least $21 an hour today. That's in response to the governor's state of emergency. Portland's current minimum wage is $14 an hour. Under the city's hazard pay provision put in place during COVID, people working in Portland must make at least 1.5 times the city's minimum wage during a state of emergency, or $21 an hour. The emergency minimum wage for tipped workers is $10.50 an hour plus tips. The emergency rate does not apply to people working remotely.
Well, just ahead on this special edition of CBS 13, travelers need to take note with this storm, how it's affecting flights coming in and out of the Portland Jetport.
And here are the conditions from our rooftop sky cam right now. Doesn't look too bad out there, but again, we're expecting some really strong wind gusts and sustained winds more around noontime, 1 o'clock, 2 p.m.
Yeah, the height of this storm definitely a few more hours away, but we're keeping you prepared all morning on this special edition of CBS 13. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Welcome back. Many marinas in southern Maine are empty or close to it this morning. Mainers are busy getting their boats out of the water ahead of the big waves expected today.
There are limited repair facilities in Casco Bay. There are a lot of boats. We've been having an amazing couple of years with the boating industry, which means we have a lot of boats on the water. Err on the side of caution prior to these events. It is not necessarily worth the risk.
Many boaters wanted to play it safe. The big waves and gusting winds that we're expecting could cause trouble for boats not properly secure. But others decided to leave their boats in and ride out the storm.
If you are going to stay at your marina, at least make sure you're putting storm lines out, which is doubling up with a little bit bigger size. Please use a rated mooring line. Leave a little bit of slack. Let the boat ride and breathe is your best bet.
The main message, stay safe. Don't try to go out on the water or make any last-minute decisions when the weather is rough. Staying inside and taking preparations is the best course of action. And if you're planning to fly this weekend, make sure and check your flight status before heading out the door. This is a live look at the Portland Jetport's website. The latest update was just at 7 o'clock this morning in that yellow bar at the top of your screen. It says about half of all flights scheduled for today are now canceled because of anticipated crosswinds directly out of the north. We'll continue monitoring the Jetport's website and bring you the very latest updates once they come in.
Now, while Lee will impact Maine, the storm is also expected to hit southwestern Nova Scotia with full force. In Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, fishermen have been brought in their boats. They lash them down with extra rope so they can withstand the strong winds and storm surge that's expected. Power crews have been out preparing for days as well, replacing and stabilizing guide wires in hopes that poles don't get knocked over. It's the first time in Nova Scotia for one couple from Washington State. They caught the last ferry from Bar Harbor just before the storm.
We had to cancel our camping reservation that was on the southern coast of Nova Scotia because it was supposed to be beautiful right on the ocean. We were really looking forward to it, but it sounds like it's not really wise to be on the ocean right now.
Now, everyone in the province is being urged rather to stay away from the coast and to avoid the possibility of dangerous storm surge.
And we're watching those winds very closely and the timing of when we're going to see the strongest winds, because in some parts right now, it's not too bad, but we know they're going to be gusting.
They are. I mean, we were just checking the power outages, Christian. It looks like CMP is in the 4,500 range. It's still very early.
Yes.
So we're going to be speaking with them coming up later this hour. But I mean, there's a lot to watch.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to see the winds continuing through the morning. It looks like the peak winds a little bit later this morning and into the early afternoon, dying down after that. So if we get to 2 p.m. or so, we're not seeing major power outages out there. Hopefully, we can avoid the worst of that, and we'll continue to quiet down by the rest of the afternoon. But let's take a look at those current wind gusts, gusting up to 30 miles per hour. I have not seen a whole lot of impressive wind speeds yet this morning. Winds gusting up to 35 in Augusta, 40 in Bangor. Overall, pretty tame out there for most of us right now. Winds gusting up to 32 in Cape Elizabeth. Again, those peak wind gusts are going to be strongest in the mid-coast and towards down east Maine. Again, an offshore wind too. So that is also somewhat of a benefit to us here, as it's not going to be pushing water into the coastline. So wind gusts in the mid-coast and in down east Maine gusting up to 50 to 60 miles per hour. For the rest of us, 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts from the Portland area up through Lewiston, Auburn, towards Augusta, further inland, Franklin, Oxford, Somerset counties, and down into York County as well. We're going to see those wind gusts approaching 50 miles per hour during the afternoon. Again, an offshore wind, that's our big benefit here. We're not going to see major coastal flooding along the coastline, but far down east Maine, Hancock and Washington counties here could see some coastal flooding. So there is a coastal flood warning, does include Acadia National Park as well. And you can see, even without a major coastal flood threat, we still have that big wave threat here all up and down the coastline. Wave heights in far down east Maine at or above 10 feet, offshore above 10 feet for most of us, approaching 15 feet. And we're going to continue to see those wave heights picking up. It looks like right around midday. That's likely when we see the biggest waves. Of course, high tide is at 12:47, so that's likely right around when we'll see those biggest waves. So here we are at lunchtime with those big waves hitting the coastline up to 20 feet along the coast here, up and down the entire coastline. So that's why we do have that threat of damage from the waves hitting the coast, and there could be some overwash as well. But again, major coastal flooding not expected out there today. Waves die down this evening, much quieter tomorrow. Out on the water. Let's talk about the rain. Again, not a big factor with the system, especially outside of far down east Maine. There's been some drizzle, there's been some light rain in central and southern portions of the state today, but that's going to taper off pretty quickly here. By early afternoon, could already be seeing some breaks in the clouds. It looks fairly sunny in many parts of western Maine as we head into the afternoon and evening. Now, it'll still be very windy out there, but again, rain not a huge factor outside of down east Maine. We'll be clearing out quickly this evening. Tomorrow is a beautiful, dry, warm, and sunny day. Perfect day for cleaning up after the storm today. So going to be a lot better of a day out there tomorrow. Highs, again, right around 80 and looking nice and sunny as well. Wind speeds continuing to pick up this morning. We'll likely see our peak winds later this morning and into the middle of the day time frame. Notice in the mid-coast, we could see gusts approaching or exceeding 60 miles per hour. For the rest of us, up to 50 mile per hour gusts are possible as we head through the morning and into the early afternoon. Again, winds dying down. By mid-afternoon, it'll be a lot calmer out there, and we'll continue to gradually taper off those winds as we head towards the evening and into tonight. By tomorrow morning, really nice and not bad at all out there. Just a light breeze by Sunday morning. So in terms of rain, again, not a big factor here. Far down east Maine could see a couple inches. For the rest of us, though, very dry storm here. And again, more sunshine than rain in parts of western Maine. So after the storm moves out today, Sunday looks beautiful. Some more rain chances Monday, but overall, it is not looking bad here. All of next week, in fact, looks pretty nice beyond Monday. Dry, sunny, fall weather, warm days, cool, crisp nights. Dan and Katie, back to you.
Christian, thanks so much. And our team coverage continues with Emily Sandham, who's live right now at the New Wagon Town Landing in Southport. Emily, you've seen some strong waves and some strong winds. How are things looking right now?
Hi, Katie. It's still pretty windy out here. I'm thinking gusts are near 40 right now. We're really just fighting the wind. The rain started to back up again. It's very light, but more so mid-coast and down east Maine will see a lot of the rain today. We have some larger waves out there right now. We're looking around 15 feet. They're breaking against the further rocks out there. we were talking before, and we're thinking around high tide, this little island right here, closer to us, we'll start seeing some waves over there. Overall, the wind is really what we're fighting out here. It'll be worst after 7 a.m. So more so right now until the evening, we're looking between gusts of 40, 50 miles per hour, even more in some areas. But really what's really on the what we're going to be powering with today are the trees. The soil's so saturated right now, so any wind gusts over 40, 50 miles per hour can easily knock trees out, leading to some power outages. I think we'll really see those power outages more so in the areas where there are some tropical storm warnings. But other than that, we're really just fighting the wind right now. It's periodically we're seeing some gusts, like I said, into the 40s and 50s area, but it is still raining just a little bit. And then there's our gust right there. Really what we're fighting out with on this deck right here. So I'm going to send it back to you guys live in Southport, and meteorologist Emily Sansom, back to you.
All right, Emily, more to come soon. Right now, every campground in Acadia National Park is closed down. Like our crews, park officials say they've been tracking the weather for several days. They expect trees could come down throughout the park, and it might not be possible for emergency crews to reach anyone who needs help. They say it's also possible waves could crash over some of the areas along Park Loop Road and wash people out into the ocean, which we saw in 2009 from the edges of Hurricane Bill. So that entire one-way section of Park Loop Road is closed right now. The same thing is being done for any area that could become dangerous.
Our primary concern is making sure that visitors and our staff have the tools that they need to stay safe during the storm.
People can stay up to date about park closures and reopenings by heading to their website. And checking in on Down East Maine, the shores of Winter Harbor are very quiet right now. Restaurants have deck furniture tied down and boats up on land. In Lemoyne, the fire department has generators and clean water standing by. They say they're ready for anything, which for them is business as usual.
Made sure that all the equipment was operating. That includes generators, chainsaws, pumps. We have several sump pumps if people's basements get flooded.
In Machias, the University of Maine campus has been fully evacuated of all faculty, staff, and students. The school will be closed throughout the day today. And we've been talking about outages. CMP is now reporting a spike, around 5,000 customers without power. Customers seeing the most outages are in Kennebec County. Versant Power is also reporting around 3,200 customers impacted and without power. We'll keep tracking both companies throughout the day, both online and on the air. Coming up, all hands on deck. How many crews CMP has brought in to deal with those outages? And stay away from the waves. Why the pass should tell you to steer clear of the beaches. And this is a live look in Bar Harbor. Look at the conditions right now. Not a good morning to be outside. And a quick update, NEMA has a list of charging and warming shelters. I just tweeted it out via X. My handle's @KDWGME. We also have that on our website. So if you lose power, check that list if you need to charge up. It's 7:22. More CBS 13 News coming up.
Welcome back. We're continuing to track Hurricane Lee and its impacts as it moves by the state. Again, not a hurricane anymore. It is basically a powerful nor'easter sitting just off of our coastline here, about to move into Nova Scotia. You can see the rain bands moving into the state. Again, rain is not a big concern. It's the winds and it's the waves that we're really looking at here for the biggest threats today. Winds overall so far haven't been too bad across the state. We're seeing gusts up to 30, 35 miles per hour and a gust to 31 in Portland. Bangor reporting a gust to 40, and far down East Maine is seeing some much stronger winds. But for most of us right now, not too bad out there. Again, we do expect these winds to continue to pick up here over the next several hours. Where we're having no issue seeing very strong winds is offshore. Of course, with the offshore winds, as soon as they hit the ocean, they can really, really speed up once there's nothing impeding them. Winds gusting up to 51 now at the Portland buoy just offshore the Portland area, 56 out in the Gulf of Maine. Every single buoy up and down the Maine coast reporting gusts at or above 40 miles per hour, which is well into the tropical storm force range. That's why there's such a concern out in the ocean if you're and why you do not want to be on a boat out in the ocean dealing with these 40 to 50 mile per hour winds and the 10 to 20 foot waves. Again, Lee, no longer a hurricane. It's a post-tropical storm. Basically, that means it is a nor'easter. It has lost its tropical characteristics that make it a hurricane or a tropical storm. But that doesn't change our impacts. This is what we were expecting all week long. Winds still 80 miles per hour, gusts 100 in the center of the circulation off to the east in Nova Scotia. Just saw gusts there around 70 miles per hour in far western Nova Scotia. So it'll continue to move to the north and to the east. Again, this further east track does save us from the worst of the winds, the worst of the rain, the worst of the waves as well, but still expecting big impacts up and down the coastline through our Saturday. Good day to just hunker down and stay indoors. Dan, back over to you.
All right, Christian, we'll see you in a few. Even a hurricane that stays well off the coast can lead to some unexpected devastation as well as danger. You might remember back in 2009 when a rogue wave kicked up by Hurricane Bill slammed into spectators in Acadia National Park. Hundreds turned out to watch the waves, but when the big one hit, more than a dozen people were dragged into the ocean. This is video of them being rescued there, and one of them, a 7-year-old girl, died in that incident. A rogue wave happens when a series of smaller waves combine. They can be 3 to 4 times larger than normal ocean waves, and it's another reason why experts say you need to be wary and stay back during dangerous surf conditions. Well, still ahead, getting ready for the worst. The preparations hospitals have made so Lee doesn't catch them off guard.
Winds are picking up and there's the potential for some coastal flooding later today. The warning from Portland leaders.
We're taking a live look in Rockport at the breakwater out there. That area closed today because of the dangers associated with the high surf. You can see those waves crashing against the breakwater right now. As high tide gets closer to the middle of the afternoon, we'll probably see that get covered over by the rising water there. Plenty more coverage to come as Lee's impacts come to Maine. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on CBS 13 as we continue to track Lee.
Earlier this morning, its classification got downgraded from a hurricane. It's now more of a tropical system, more like a downeaster, as we've seen. We have team coverage this morning. All the things covered across the state.
And we do want to bring in meteorologist Christian Bridges. So, Christian, we're kind of talking about nor'easter type conditions here.
That's exactly right, Katie. No change in its strength. It is still a very powerful storm offshore, but again, now it is essentially a nor'easter sitting off of our coastline here. So here's a live look up at the Pemaquid Point Lighthouse somewhere. Again, we're expecting a lot of the biggest impacts today up in the mid-coast towards down East Maine. It's probably hard to see, but you can see the flag there. There we go. Moving offshore. So that's a big factor here. All of the winds today are offshore winds. So that does help us at least in some regards here. But again, still expecting power outages from just how strong those winds will be across all of the state. So you can see on our radar here, plenty of rain moving on through, pretty light rain for the most part. And again, rain, not a big concern with this storm. It is the wind and it's the waves. Outside of down East Maine, we're just not going to get a whole lot of rainfall here. But as this band here, I'm noticing this heavier band, as this pivots back towards the west, this likely has a lot more strong wind gusts with it, and we'll continue to see those winds picking up as it moves inland and further to the west. So here's a look at our current wind speeds, gusting to 35 in Augusta, 31 in Portland. Only spot seeing tropical storm gusts right now is Bangor at 40, not even Bar Harbor seeing that right now. And again, along the coastline, seeing those gusts approaching 50 to 55 miles per hour offshore. As those offshore winds hit the ocean, they're not impeded anymore by friction from land, so they can really speed up. So our offshore winds very, very strong out there right now. Current stats on Lee, again, it is a nor'easter now, an extratropical or post-tropical system. It's just lost those tropical characteristics that make it a hurricane. The eye, warm center, it has brought in cooler air into its center, so it has transitioned to a system basically with fronts, which makes it a nor'easter style storm here. So again, no change to the impacts. It's still just such a big storm and the winds are so strong that we're still going to see widespread impacts up and down the coastline here. Hitting Nova Scotia over the next couple hours here, moving off to the north and east and then leaving us behind as we head into Sunday. Much quieter weather on the way for tomorrow and into next week as well. I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. So here's what we're looking at for the impacts from Lee, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. today. That's the worst conditions, likely late morning and early afternoon, the peak of the conditions out there. Wind, again, frequently gusting 40 to 50 miles per hour. Sustained winds likely won't reach that point, but all it takes is one big gust up towards 50 miles per hour, and that will quickly ramp up those power outages. Again, also those big coastal concerns with 10 to 20-foot waves all up and down the Maine coastline. Breaking down where we're going to see those peak wave heights coming up. Dan and Katie, back to you.
Christian, thanks. And our team coverage continues. We're checking back in with Mal Meyer, who's live along the Eastern Prom in Portland. Mal, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, well, just a short time ago, we were up at Fort Allen Park right over there. And to be honest with you, there wasn't too much wind right over there, but I think we were really sheltered from the worst of it because now we're just down the street and the wind gusts are really catching us off guard here. Let's take a look. You know, back up at Fort Allen Park, we were only recording wind gusts of a few miles per hour, but we're getting pretty sustained winds here, about 12 miles per hour. I think it's going to creep up here a little bit again. I know a short time ago when we were down by the water, it was more around 20 miles per hour that we recorded at one point. But again, those wind gusts can catch you off guard really quickly. We are seeing a lot of people out here walking around. I've been talking to some of the people who have been out. One man told me that he thought the worst of the storm had already passed, but that's definitely not the case as we've been talking about. Christian was saying that those wind gusts were going to pick up sometime after 7, and we're getting actually a pretty good one here right now. Woo! Oh my gosh. That's 27 miles per hour this just recorded. And woo! Wow. It really does happen just so fast in just a matter of seconds. It was catching up to 22, 23, 24 miles per hour here. That wind is really starting to pick up and it's just going to continue throughout the day. Another concern for city leaders here in Portland was the fact that, you know, The high tide is going to be coming up right at about 12:45 or so early this afternoon. And so there is some concern for coastal floodings, of course, with this wind and those typical problem areas and low-lying spots that we see around the city. That's why Portland leaders were encouraging people to just be aware of this ahead of time. And they're going to be putting out barricades as well if there is any coastal flooding later on today. They're reminding people to never drive through the floodwaters just in case there are some floodwaters. Never go around the barricades because you never know just how deep the water is or what damage might lie below. But again, right now, the main concern is for these wind gusts that are quite powerful here. They were encouraging residents to really make sure that all of their belongings were secured down because they can just go absolutely flying in weather like this. Woo! Let's see how much this one is. All right, we are hitting 29 miles per hour. And again, they're really starting to pick up here now. And this is going to continue throughout the day. I know Christian was telling me that he's expecting to see anywhere from 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts that will definitely catch you off guard if you're out and about walking around before those winds really pick up. Reporting live in Portland, Mel Meyer, CBS 13 News. Back to you in the studio.
All right, Mel, thanks. Again, stay up to date on all the latest conditions that Lee is bringing into Maine. Download our WGME weather app. It's free in your app store. Just search WGME WX. Maine's emergency declaration gives the federal government permission to assist the state now and after the storm hits. That aid coming in, it comes in the form of both mass care, evacuation, as well as shelter support. FEMA told us Friday that their agents were setting up, all hands on deck, standing by for this morning.
FEMA is there in a support role, but we want to make sure that the localities, the counties, any tribal areas, all have what they need, and they're the lead right now. So we're going to give them all the support they need to ensure that residents have the information.
Now, FEMA is urging Mainers to be prepared, have a kit ready to go, phone charged, as well as some water stored. You can head to WGME.com for more information on where emergency shelters and charging stations are being set up. We'll be able to update that site as conditions continue to change this morning. Governor Janet Mills says the federal declaration helps Maine be more proactive in its response, not just left dealing with the after effects.
Stages them more quickly. We don't have to wait till after a storm occurs and then ask for help. We did this preemptively for good reason, so that we'll be prepared ahead of time before damage occurs.
While this storm has weakened in recent days, including today, MEMA is still prepared for widespread damage, especially from strong winds. Director of MEMA, Peter Rogers, says they've been in contact with the state's major electric utilities, which are mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer we've had, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to some outages.
The other piece is the trees are full canopies right now. They have all the leaves on the trees, the roots and the ground is soft. So pretty much the whole state is in that same situation. The winds will be stronger on the coast, but as you probably saw, they are going to start moving inland too. So, that's why we looked at having the whole state declaration.
MEMA is in full activation throughout the weekend, bringing in multiple state agencies together so they can monitor Lee's latest path and impacts.
People up and down the coast spent the past week preparing for the storm, especially in the past 48 hours. That's certainly the case for communities on Penobscot Bay, like Rockland, which is expected to get hit hard by the heavy winds. A number of homeowners in the town are worried about power outages that could stem from toppling trees. That's the same concern for residents in Owl's Head. We're also worried about the damage from heavy and strong waves. But after taking precautions, some we spoke with say they're ready.
I know some of it's pushing out to sea, but we'll get hit with some rain, but it's nothing we can't handle. I mean, brand new buildings here, and just gotta shut the doors, lock them up. They'll be all right.
Several businesses in the area have closed down for the day, rescheduling some Saturday events for tomorrow when the weather is supposed to drastically clear up.
Now, both power crews and the Coast Guard took massive preparations over the past week to get ready up and down the coast. The U.S. Coast Guard says its top priority was safety on the water. They'll be having search and rescue crews ready to respond to an emergency 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the next few days. The Coast Guard also made sure the maritime transportation system is clear of any debris like oil or pollution when it reopens to traffic after the storm. CMP says the high winds could be a challenge for them. In fact, outages are among the biggest concern with this storm, and they've brought in some extra crews.
We have around 400 to 500 crews coming in really from across the eastern seaboard as north as Canada.
CMP says they're monitoring the forecast to see where the winds may hit the hardest and the region's most vulnerable areas, sending and staging crews out to where they think the most damage will be. They also they're adding sandbags in vulnerable areas because of potential flooding impacts.
And we're checking back in on those power outages. They keep going up. CMP is now reporting around 8,100 customers without power. Most of those outages in Kennebec County. Versant Power is also reporting outages with around 5,000 customers currently impacted. We'll keep tracking these outages for both companies throughout the day, both online and on air. Hospitals across the state taking steps to prepare for Lee as well. At Northern Light Health Hospitals, they tested all generators and made sure they have enough fuel. The hospitals also stocked up on more materials. Hospital staff say they've prepared for situations like this and will be ready to serve patients throughout the storm.
Still to come here on CBS 13, keeping us safe from the skies. How a group of NOAA scientists are tracking all the latest conditions of Lee from right above the storm.
Live. And that was Emily Santum. You can see the strong winds, some of them almost kind of blowing her over a little bit. And same with Mount Meyer. Can you believe it?
I mean, the winds are really starting to ramp up there. This is the live look in Augusta this morning. Inland, we're Kennebec County in Augusta. That's the highest number of outages that we've seen so far this morning. We're hopefully going to get an update from CMP here within the next hour. We'll have plenty more coming up here on CBS 13. Well, thanks for coming back with us here on CBS 13. We're going to check in with meteorologist Emily Santum. She's monitoring those changing conditions as now this nor'easter type storm, Lee, is impacting our coast. She's live on Southport Island. And Emily, it looks like the wind ramping up out there.
Hi, Dan. It is really windy out here. We just had a wind gust that pushed me back a couple of feet. Overall, the wind is becoming gustier. You can probably hear it and see it. It's really gusty out here. We got some big waves out near the lighthouse as well. Those waves are only going to grow larger for later today. We're looking between 15 to 20, even 20-foot waves in some areas as well. It's still raining just a little bit, though. We're seeing more rain in other parts of mid-coast, further on the down east side. We're thinking that the wind will be worse after 7 a.m. until this evening, looking at gusts between 40 to 50 miles per hour. So this is really going to be where there's going to be some more power outages for today, more so in the tropical storm warning areas. See, the ground is pretty wet. We've gotten a lot of rain this summer, almost over 18 inches of rain, I should say. So the roots are going to have a hard time holding down the trees in the ground when the wind is swaying the trees around. There's a lot of leaves on the trees too. So they're just working as a canopy for the trees to eventually fall on the ground. But really what we're monitoring right now is the wind. The wind will only become gustier as we head into the late morning, mid-afternoon hours. So we'll still be here all morning, checking out the wind, fighting it, even looking at these larger waves. I'm thinking around high tide. So after lunchtime, we'll see some larger waves that we'll see more of a splash over, which is really what we're looking for. There's our big wind gust. Oh, and this is a long one too. So overall, it's just really windy out here. The rain's picking up a little bit as well. I'm going to send it back to you guys in Southport. I'm CBS 13 meteorologist Emily Santom. Back to you guys.
Emily, thanks. And our team coverage continues now. Of course, Lee, not only impacting Maine, but other parts of New England too. Temi Tope Adelaide joins us live now from Narragansett, Rhode Island. And how are conditions there?
Yeah, Katie, the conditions have picked up quite a bit here in the past couple of hours. We actually have lots of action happening. If you look behind me, you can actually see we have fishermen here looking to catch the big one. If you look over to my right, you can see we've got about a dozen surfers in the water right now trying to ride out those really nice waves. Now, all of this just started, again, just a few hours ago, and now that it's much brighter, you can see a lot more of this action. Now we are really getting the sights and the sounds of this now post-tropical cyclone Lee as winds are picking up. I've actually had to hold on to my hat a couple of times because it's gotten a little gusty here in the past 30 minutes. In terms of impact now, Rhode Island isn't expected to see the brunt of this now post-tropical cyclone Lee, but we are expecting gustier winds, high tides, and high waves in the next few hours. Now we're going to keep you all updated on the latest as we learn more and see more of the action unfolding here. For now, I'm Temi Tope Adelaide, live in Narragansett for WGME.
Thanks so much. And obviously, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, they're kind of now at the tail end of this storm. Maine, we still have the impacts to come.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We're just really
and
getting started.
You can see why surfers would want to go take advantage of the big
yeah.
waves, but heads up, at least in York, those beaches are closed today. Police do not want people heading into the water or really even going there to check out the waves.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you're a very experienced surfer, of course, you understand how to deal with these conditions, but it's the people who do not understand how to deal with these conditions that they're trying to keep out of the water for very good reason. Again, these waves are so powerful. They have so much energy with them. You really don't want to be messing around with them. So again, wind speeds have been picking up through this morning. We're seeing gusts approaching 30 to 40 miles per hour across much of the state. Going to continue to see these picking up through the morning hours as we continue to see Lee and its impacts here across Maine. So let's take a look at our current alerts. A tropical storm warning remains in effect for the entire coastline of Maine, extending inland as far as Sebago Lake, Lewiston, Auburn towards Augusta, and further inland into far northern Maine as well. Again, for those very strong winds that we are expecting along the coastline, winds of 50 to 60 miles per hour, mid-coast and down east Maine, eastward from the Brunswick area towards the international border. Slightly lower wind speeds further inland, Lewiston to Augusta, over towards Freiburg, Franklin, Oxford, and Somerset counties, as well as most of Cumberland County and the greater Portland area. 40 to 50 mile per hour winds, though, easily enough to cause down branches, down trees, and of course, those power outages as well. So that's why there's such a concern for widespread outages. It just won't take too much wind to do that, just because of how weakened and how saturated those trees are. And we also have a coastal flood warning far down east Maine, Hancock and Washington counties here. Not a major coastal flood threat today because all of these winds are offshore. But again, the big waves slamming into the coastline middle of the day today, that's what we're really concerned about. Again, we've been watching these wave heights all morning. They've been picking up. Portland buoy approaching 10 feet now, out in the Gulf of Maine, approaching 15 feet. And similar story in down east Maine, above 10 feet wave heights being reported. We're going to continue to see these picking up, especially around high tide at 12:47 or right around that lunchtime hour. Up and down the Maine coastline, that is when those worst wave impacts will be arriving. So you can see the waves will continue to pick up here as we head into the middle of the day, right around noon. Again, that's high tide, and that's when we'll likely see some of the biggest waves as well. And that's why there's that risk of overwash and damage just from the force of the waves slamming into the coastline. So again, exercise extreme caution. If you are by the ocean today, I would highly recommend not getting near the big, powerful waves. Things do quiet down quite a bit tonight. Tomorrow, looking much better. Again, sunny skies, much calmer out there. Waves die down as well. Rainfall, not a huge concern today. It's the wind and it's the waves. Down East Maine could see some flooding as the rain will continue and it will be heavy at times there, but for most of us, we'll even see some sunshine poking out as early afternoon, and we'll continue to clear our skies out gradually heading into the evening. Notice some pockets of sun out there as we head towards the late afternoon and evening. Notice the rain. It's only Bangor towards the east. A lot of us going to be very dry out there this afternoon. The winds will continue. The waves will still be there, but the rain, not a major concern. We'll clear out overnight tonight. Beautiful weather on the way for tomorrow. Great cleanup weather. Hopefully we can get those power crews to restore power very quickly with this kind of weather tomorrow. Upper 70s, low 80s out there, going to be a beautiful day. And again, at least this is not mid-winter, because then we'd be dealing with cold temperatures behind any major power outages. At least the weather is very, very tolerable for dealing with no power here over the next couple of days. It's going to be warm in the day, cool and comfy at night. Again, the winds continuing to ramp up this morning. We could see gusts at or above 60 miles per hour, mid-coast to down East Maine through early afternoon, tapering off as we head towards this evening. Dan and Katie, back to you.
And thank you. And as Lee sweeps into Maine, it is expected to be a very busy weekend for crews from Central Maine Power.
Yeah, CMP's Director of Corporate Communications, John Breed, is joining us now by phone. John, thanks for joining us. I know your crew is obviously very busy, so we appreciate you carving out some time for us. It looks like on your website about 8,800 people without power in your coverage area right now. Can you just give us an idea of what your crews are experiencing?
Good morning, Katie. Good morning, Dan. Thanks for having on. Yeah, with the impacts of hurricanes expected to pick up throughout the day today, we're preparing to respond to outages, potential outages caused by high winds, associated tree damage, and coastal flooding. Steps of storm preparation took place early this morning with the arrival of 5 additional crews to support restoration efforts if needed. So we have approximately 400 to 500 extra crews out in the field joining our team pre-staged across our service area. As your teams, your meteorological teams, about the coastal areas are seeing highest winds at the moment. That's where we're focusing our efforts. But we do have crews in every county in our service area that will be ready to respond if needed.
And John, at what point does it become too dangerous even for the crews to be doing the restoration efforts?
Well, one of the challenges with a storm like this is wind speed. We can't operate a bucket truck. We can't put crews in bucket trucks if the wind speeds are greater than 35 miles an hour. Though in preparation for every storm, we work closely with emergency management officials to ensure local needs are met and prioritize. That means the road debris clearing, clearing trees that may have fallen to help emergency vehicles get to where they need to go if needed. We have a very professional tree care team, a great arborist who is going to help the state if needed.
And John, can you just give us an idea? Obviously, if people see damage, what is the best way to report that? And you know, many of us who have been in Maine for a long time know the CMP slogan of no line is safe to touch ever. Can you just give us an idea of what people should know, the safety things that they should keep in mind if they see some damage out there today?
Of course. Number one rule is no down line is safe to touch. We've all heard that before, and it's a very important thing to remember today. If there is a down line fast reporting, you can contact us 3 ways: by phone, through the mobile app, and you can visit our outage online. We urge you to do so and then stay well clear and crew is able to arrive. If you don't have our app, you can download it through the App Store or through Google Play. Also text app to 267898. We'll send you a link so you can download it too.
All right, John Breed with CMP, we appreciate your time, and we know that those crews are going to have a long day. We hope they all stay safe out there.
Absolutely. Appreciation goes out to all of them that are working out there today. Thanks, John.
Let's give you a live look outside right now as we head to break. We have a shot here of Nova Scotia where you can see some really choppy waves out there for sure.
Yeah, Christian has been tracking the path of the remnants of Lee, and it's supposed to come right into the Yarmouth area here within the next few hours. They're going to be taking the brunt of that storm, but here in Maine, we still have a lot of impacts as well.
Yep, more updates on those outages and update from the Portland Jet Board coming up. Stay with us.
Welcome back. We're continuing to track the impacts of Lee across the state, and notice as some of these stronger rain bands move into down East Maine. Watch all these damage reports popping up here in Trenton near Acadia National Park. Trees down on lines with sparking wires. Easy to see why we've seen a big power outage spike in far down East Maine. I'm going to click through some of these damage reports to see what we're seeing in the far down east portion of the state. Expect similar impacts here in other parts of the state as we head through the next several hours here. So we've got another one in Steuben, tree down across both lanes of Route 1 near Steuben, so likely blocked for travel down in far down East Maine as of right now. Also seeing some more damage reports right near the international border. You can see another Route 1 in Machias reduced to one lane due to trees blocking that route there. So Route 1 really impacted, it looks like, in far down East Maine. We're looking at some of these other damage reports here. And we've just seen a lot of the trees down, branches down. That's what we're expecting here for most of us across the state as we head through the next several hours. Again, there's that Machias report again, and we'll continue to look at some of these other reports from far down East Maine. Again, a lot of just trees down and potentially falling onto wires as well. So that's why we're seeing the power outages increasing across the state, and expect more of this over the next several hours. Dan and Katie, back to you.
Christian, thanks so much. And finally this hour, the storm is bringing in a lot of trouble for many Mainers. So we want to take a moment to appreciate the calm that came before it.
Wow, it was amazing. Last night, there were just some incredible views of the sunset ahead of today's rough weather from Lee. We got some great pictures from our viewers. I mean, I got some amazing pictures too.
Me
It was just all of us did. It was incredible. Everyone rushed outside.
It was magical. It seemed like everybody in the Portland area was like, wow, look at this. I mean, look at this view from Russell. Caught this gorgeous shot. Wow.
It's a postcard. It's picture perfect.
Yeah, picture perfect. Looks like someone took a lighter to the sky and just lit the clouds on fire.
Like a painting.
I know. And Lori was actually at the Field of Dreams game at Hadlock last night. Check this out. The sky looking so magical. It almost just feels like you're kind of all part of something together. Experiencing it at the same time. Yes.
And it wasn't just us here in Maine. Every single state in New England saw this sunset. New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, they all got it as well. So we were all together in this beautiful sunset experience. Yeah, Field of Dreams, that's right.
It's truly, yeah.
It's why we live here, right?
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, you experience things like this. Yes, we have a major storm that's going to have some impacts today, but both before and tomorrow is going to be a beautiful day, hopefully after the storm moves through. So
sunset of the year, maybe?
I agree. Totally agree. And it is pretty amazing how we're going to bounce back from this.
Yes.
Look at this right now.
We've been watching this cam, and it's been so cool to see
shots of the day from here.
Right. It's been so cool seeing the waves increasing. Now I'm seeing them splash up onto the actual walkway there. It'll be really cool to see it at high tide coming up around 12:40 this afternoon.
Yeah, well, we have another 2 hours of special coverage right here on CBS 13 and on Fox 23 coming up at 8 o'clock. Stay with us.
Special Weather Authority storm coverage is sponsored by Casco Bay Generators.
It's 8 o'clock. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of CBS 13. All eyes have been on Lee the past week, preparing for this moment. A lot of storm preparations underway. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dan Lamparello.
And I'm Katie Sampson. Now, updates just in the past couple of hours. Lee is no longer a hurricane, but it is a very strong storm. We're already seeing many impacts out there this morning, lots of power outages, and we do have team coverage for you right here on CBS 13 and on Fox 23. We have live in the field. We have Mount Meyer, who is bringing us the very latest from the Portland area. And nearby in Old Orchard Beach, we have Dave Ead. And we, of course, have some live images for you from our rooftop sky cam. This is deceiving because it doesn't look very windy out there right now.
It does not at all. But I mean, we saw Emily a few minutes ago, Mal in our last hour, who was recording at least 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts on the Eastern Prom. So a lot to watch.
Yes. And let's get right to meteorologist Christian Bridges, because Christian, you have some updates on these incredibly strong wind gusts.
Yeah, and far down East Maine, just off the coast of Washington County, a gust to 80 miles per hour just recorded. Of course, that's where we're expecting the strongest winds to be. That's literally just a couple miles from Canada, but still goes to show you the power of the storm. You can see those really heavy bands rotating into down East Maine. And notice as they've done so, watch all those little reports popping up. Those are all damage reports as that stronger band moves in, those strong wind gusts easily enough to knock down trees and power lines. So as that moves further westward into the central and southern portions of the state, we'll likely see a lot of these little reports popping up as well, and continuing to increase those power outage numbers, which have really gone up quickly through the past hour or so this morning. So things starting to get into the thick of it now as we head through the next few hours here. So here's a look at some of our wind gusts. There we go. Augusta, our first tropical storm force gust of the day, 41 miles per hour. I bet our Kennebec County outage is really about to spike here. Down towards Bangor, 43-mile-per-hour gust here in Portland. Still not seeing crazy winds here in Cumberland County, although I bet you we are going to see those really increasing here over the next hour or so. I bet those Cumberland County outage numbers also likely to increase as well. Look at these offshore winds. They are very intense out there. Jonesport buoy, nearly 60-mile-per-hour gusts. Very interested to see if we can get some of these buoys to approach hurricane force this morning. Up and down the Maine coast, it's tropical storm conditions offshore. The absolute opposite weather that you'd want if you are going to be out on a boat in the Gulf of Maine. Newest update from the Hurricane Center, winds at 80 miles per hour. This is from 8 a.m. Here with Lee, a post-tropical cyclone. Again, it's a nor'easter, essentially. Just think of it like that. No longer a hurricane, but the impacts very similar to if a powerful nor'easter was moving by just offshore. Again, it is minutes or hours from landfall here in western Nova Scotia. Going to continue to move to the north and then race off to the northeast. It's out of our hair. Very thankfully, even by this evening, much better out there. So the worst conditions, we're likely really entering that worst condition period here from the mid-morning through the early afternoon, really late morning, early afternoon for the peak of the conditions with those gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour. Again, Augusta gusting to 41 right now, and we're going to continue to see those coastal concerns, 10 to 20-foot waves as well. I'm breaking down the highest waves, the strongest winds coming up in just a few minutes. Katie and Dan, back to you.
Christian, thank you. And our team coverage continues now with meteorologist Emily Santom, who's live at the New Wagon Town Landing in Southport. Emily, you haven't blown over yet, which is good news.
No, Katie, I have not blown over yet. I can say in the last 20 minutes, though, the gusts have really amped up here. Our light has fallen over a few times. I'm getting pushed back. The waves are growing larger by the second. It's also raining a little bit here. Not as bad. It's really so on and off. More rain will be on the way from mid-coast and down East Maine. But setting it back to the waves, these waves are huge. We're projecting between 15 to 20-foot waves. The wind's going to continue, though, pushing me around for the remainder of the morning, as the wind will be the worst between 7 a.m. through the evening, gusts up to 40, even 50 plus in some areas. We're really just watching the trees right now. A lot of power outages just because the ground is so saturated. So any gusts 40, 50 miles per hour can easily knock over over trees. So this is definitely why we're going to start seeing some more power outages moving forward. But all I can really say is that I'm just fighting the wind today. It's just a lot of wind and rain's on and off. It's brightening up, I should say, past hours. So it almost looks like the sun's going to rise. It's not. We don't have dark clouds. I will say the smaller clouds that are in the sky, those are moving a lot quicker. That's typical in a tropical system scenario event like we are. We can definitely feel and hear the wind coming, and that's just going to be one of our primary threats for today. So I'm going to send it back to you guys In Southport, I'm meteorologist Emily Sansom. Back to you.
All right, Emily, things definitely picking up out there. From the Mid-Coast, though, to right here in Portland, we're tracking all of the latest of Lee's real-time impacts on our state.
Let's check back in with Mal Meyer, who is live in Portland. We can hear the wind, Mal, and you have actually been tracking those wind speeds.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Katie. We have been watching that closely. It's just picking up here a little bit more now, but we've been recording pretty sustained winds on the low end, around 10 miles per hour up to 15, and then 20 miles per hour. Those winds are pretty sustained now at this point, though it really all depends on where you were. Of course, back up on the Eastern Prom just about 30 minutes ago, we were recording wind speeds of nearly 30 miles per hour that can quickly catch you off guard. But we're seeing a lot of people down, out and around, walking their dogs, taking it all in. And just a short time ago, we also saw the ferry service running to and from the mainland. We've been seeing a lot of boats out there on the water, at least the ferry service was. Now, the winds do continue to pick up, and we did pass a low tide around an hour and a half ago. The high tides won't be until around 12:45. With all this wind, city leaders will be putting up barricades and things like that in case there are flood waters. So if you see them, don't go around because you just don't know how deep the water is. Now, again, we are seeing those boats out there on Casco Bay rocking and rolling on the water, bouncing around as the winds continue to pick up, and so do the waves. So those are, the wind gusts are just so unpredictable right now at this point, but we're seeing a lot of people taking it all in out here on the Eastern Prom. Again, those winds are going to continue to get worse as the morning goes on. Reporting live in Portland, I'm Mal Meyer. Back over to you in the studio.
All right, Mal, good to see the conditions out there. Thanks. FEMA in Maine is ready to help if needed for what's next.
There are definitely boots on the ground. Urban search and rescue is another layer of support that's provided. So there are resources in place in case people find themselves in a position to need rescue. And of course, all the assets that are there at the state's request are where they need to be.
That FEMA aid is available after the president approved Governor Janet Mills's emergency disaster declaration request. That action, which the governor is now praising, Mills says this is helping crews better prepare for any possible damage that could occur. Maine's Emergency Management Agency is fully activated to monitor Lee's anticipated impacts as well. And while the storm has weakened in recent days, MEMA says it is still expecting widespread damage, especially from heavy winds.
That wind field is over 300 miles long, so the state will get damages. We will lose power.
Director Rogers says MEMA has been in contact with the state's major electric utilities. They're mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer that we've had, meaning every section of the state could see the impacts and be vulnerable to outages.
And the other big story is the big waves that we're expecting from the remnants of Lee. This is a live look in York right now. You can see stage neck in, and we are seeing those strong waves. We just saw Mal on the Eastern Prom.
Yeah.
He's definitely seeing some really strong winds. And York beaches are closed today. The restroom facilities, everything at York beaches are closed because police just don't want people going there. It could be dangerous.
Especially this afternoon.
Right.
I think a lot of people might think that the worst may be behind us, but the worst may be yet to come,
Exactly.
especially as those tides move up towards the afternoon.
And if you're planning to travel by plane today, make sure and check your flight status before heading out the door. This is a live look at the Portland Jetport's website. The latest update was posted earlier this morning around 7 o'clock. That's in that yellow bar at the top of your screen. It says that about half of all flights scheduled for today are now canceled because of the strong winds.
Before the most recent update, the Jetport was only expecting minimal impacts, but that's now changed as this storm developed. We'll continue to monitor the Jetport's website and bring you any updates once they come in this morning. Well, our team coverage continues now, and of course, Lee not only impacting Maine, but other parts of New England too. Our reporter Jason Doris joins us now live from Orleans down on the Cape in Massachusetts. And Jason, what are you experiencing down there?
So the rain bands up to this point here on the Cape where we've been located in Orleans have been very kind to us. The rain has just kind of started to ramp up within the last 20 minutes or so. But what has been relentless is the wind. We've been continuing to see those winds sustained between about 20, 25 miles an hour, gusting up to about 40, 45 miles an hour at times. That has also helped with that surf, that large surf that we've been tracking all morning long here on the Cape, seeing those waves breaking in the surf zone between about 10 and 15 feet here in Orleans. And we're expecting this to continue to be on. Thankfully, right now we're at low tide. That high tide is expected to come in later on this afternoon. So we have one more tidal cycle to kind of get through. But we could see where high tide was earlier on this morning, right up against the sand dunes. And that was what was kind of expected with the 1 to 3 feet of storm surge here locally on the Cape. Now, we have a little bit longer to go before these winds start to die down in the later afternoon hours, but it's going to continue to be a little bit long of a day here. Expecting those gusts to still be around about 40, 45 miles an hour. Some of the offshore buoys, pretty impressive stuff coming in right now with those waves sitting at about 13 feet. And also those sustained winds up in Provincetown right now, sitting around 30 miles an hour, gusting up to about 50 still. So for right now in Orleans on the Cape, meteorologist Jason Doris, back to you.
Jason, thanks so much. I mean, you're giving us a good look at what's to come up here in Maine for sure. Thanks.
And we do want to give you a live look at 295 in Portland. Yeah, some good news for everyone, including our crews out live this morning, is it's really not raining much.
No,
you know?
I think that's a huge relief for a lot of people, especially after all the flooding we saw earlier this summer. Winds, though, another story.
I know, and we'll have much more on those winds coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Right now, every campground in Acadia National Park is closed down because of Lee. Like our crews, park officials say they've been tracking the weather for several days. They expect trees could come down throughout the park, and it might not be possible for emergency crews to reach everyone who needs help. They say it's also possible waves could crash over some of the areas along Park Loop Road and wash people out into the ocean, which we saw back in 2009 from the edges of Hurricane Bill. So that entire one-way section of Park Loop Road is closed right now. The same thing is being done for any area that could become dangerous.
Our primary concern is making sure that visitors and our staff have the tools that they need to stay safe during the storm.
People can stay up to date about park closures and reopenings by heading to their website.
Well, switching gears now, back to our team coverage. Our Dave Eade joining us live from Old Orchard Beach this morning. Dave, we've been trying to see how Old Orchard Beach has been going to fare with this. It looks like the tide is starting to come in. What are the conditions you're seeing?
Yeah, that's right, Dan. You know, when we were driving into OOB this morning, there were electronic signs throughout the town, you know, warning folks of the riptide effects. But you can see really the only situation right now, the waves, they are a good size. And as you mentioned, the tide is rolling in, but there's a lot of folks along the beach, you know, just taking photos, going for a nice walk. We see a lot of dogs out on the beach as well. Folks really trying to, you know, get the full effect here without going into the water, because obviously that's a dangerous situation. You don't want to be in the water today. We are along the pier here. And guys, I don't know if you remember, Katie and Dan, you're probably too young to remember the blizzard of 1978, but part of the pier here in OOB was destroyed, not so much from the snow. They didn't really receive a lot of snow back then, but it was because of the winds. We are receiving some high winds here today, but I think really, the pier is going to be in good shape. Kind of taking folks it all continue in here, to walk along the beach. We'll talk to some really just kind of taking it all in here. The situation here, not a lot of rain so far, just a lot of wind and a lot of waves. And the situation here, not a lot of rain so far, just a lot of wind and a lot of waves. And we'll have much more throughout the morning. But that's the situation here down in OOB. Christian, we'll send it back over to you, my friend.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. So fun to have you out reporting on the weather as opposed to sports this morning. Pretty rare Dave Ead moment for us this morning. And yeah, continuing to see those winds picking up out there. The waves really going to be the biggest factor when we get to high tide later on this afternoon. So let's take a look at our current wind speeds. Again, starting to see those winds gusting above tropical storm force for some inland areas. Augusta seeing a gust of 41 miles per hour, 43 mile per hour gust in Bangor. Most of us seeing pretty tame winds right now. Above our heads, the winds are very, very strong. Now, at times, we'll see those winds mix down to the surface. That's likely what we just saw in Augusta. And as we continue to move through the day, we get a little bit of heating, maybe even a little peak of sunshine. That could actually help to bring some of those stronger winds down to the surface. So even if it does turn even sunny this afternoon in western Maine, that could actually help to make the winds even stronger. In terms of offshore winds, no trouble reaching tropical storm force. We knew that the strongest winds wouldn't be over land, they would be off of our coastline here, and that's exactly what we're seeing this morning. Winds gusting up to 50 to 55 miles per hour, especially in down East Maine off the coastline there, far down East Maine, gusting up to 56 miles per hour as of right now. Again, a tropical storm warning remains in place for the entire coastline of Maine. Also, all of the offshore waters and extending inland into much of Cumberland County, Lewiston-Auburn area, Kennebec County, including Augusta, and it does also extend up into northern and far eastern Maine as well. In terms of our peak wind gusts today, again, we've seen some gusts at or above 40 miles per hour already this morning. Peak gusts will likely be in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range. Would not be too surprised to see our peak gust in Portland, maybe even above 50 miles per hour late this morning or early this afternoon. Similar story, Lewiston, Augusta, Sanford, and if we do see gusts like that, again, power outage potential really, really goes up. Worst winds will be mid-coast and down east. That's where we could see gusts 50 to 60 miles per hour, even higher than that. I noticed just offshore Washington County, far down East Maine, a gust to 77 miles per hour, and then another gust right after that to 80 miles per hour. So yes, there are some very strong winds. Luckily, the brunt of the very strong winds missing us to our east into Nova Scotia. So that's some good news. If we were dealing with 70, 80 mile per hour winds along the coast, we would be talking about power outages for weeks and weeks across the state. So luckily, not looking at that bad of a situation here, but still going to be very windy. Winds gusting out of the north up to 50 miles per hour. Late morning through the early afternoon, that's likely when we see those strongest gusts. Again, mid-coast down east, gusting up towards 60 miles per hour, potentially even stronger than that. And then winds do gradually die down as we head towards the evening hours, looking a lot calmer by the time we get into the evening after sunset, and by tomorrow morning, looking a whole lot better out there as well. Going to be a much quieter, nicer day for our Sunday. Taking a look at our current wave heights, those have also been on the increase. Now 15 feet waves out in the Gulf of Maine. Those are going to continue to move towards the coastline here, and they'll really become an issue at high tide when they're slamming directly into the coastline at the high tide line. So definitely something to keep in mind here. Down East Maine seeing 10 to 15 foot waves, 5 to 10 foot waves here in the greater Portland area and along the southern Maine coastline as well. So seeing those big waves out there this morning, going to continue to see those increasing 15 to 20 foot waves. Couldn't rule out some 25 foot waves, at least offshore, as we head into this afternoon. Worst conditions, again, late morning through the early afternoon, gradually dying down tonight. Much calmer wave activity for tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow looks absolutely beautiful, almost a beach day for tomorrow. So just have to get through the rest of today. Notice the rain, again, I've been mentioning this for really this entire week. Rain is not going to be a major factor with this storm. Again, sunshine looks more likely than rain in many areas this afternoon, especially in the mountains, far western Maine, likely to see some peaks of sun. As I mentioned earlier, though, that may help to bring down some of those stronger wind gusts from up above our heads. We'll have to see if that does end up happening here this afternoon. Either way, rain is really not a concern after about lunchtime today. It's going to be pretty dry out there, just very windy, and we'll still be dealing with those waves, of course. We're clearing out overnight tonight. Again, as I mentioned, Sunday, a beach day basically. It's a beautiful day tomorrow. Temperatures in at the upper 70s to right around 80. Lots of sunshine out there. Great weather for getting power restored, cleaning up after the impacts of Lee today. Again, rain is not an issue here. Down East Maine, sure, could see some flooding there with a couple inches of rain expected. Look at these rainfall totals. No rain expected in Augusta, really. Very little in Portland. It's going to be sprinkles, very light if we do see any rain at all through the rest of the day. Keeping our reports of Lee updated here as we head through the next couple hours. Dan and Katie, back to you.
A lot we'll be monitoring over the next hours. Thanks. Right now, CMP is reporting almost 6,500 outages. That's down a little bit from what we saw earlier this morning. Customers seeing the most reports are in Knox, Penobscot, and Waldo County, which makes sense because those are the areas getting the brunt of this storm right now.
Exactly. Versant Power is also reporting outages with nearly 10,000 customers now without power. The numbers are changing really every second. We'll keep tracking the outages with both companies throughout the day, both online and on the air.
Well, we're still tracking so much in our special coverage of CBS 13 this morning as we take a live look over Casco Bay. The winds are really starting to pick up out there. Our team of reporters are standing by.
And this is just the beginning. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Okay, at 9:03.
Well, one group of Mainers is facing even more uncertainty than many as Lee impacts Maine, those living in tents on the streets of Portland.
I ain't got no place to go. There's a hurricane coming in. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Now, stop the sweeps was the message echoed by a crowd of people who gathered on the front steps of Portland City Hall last night. They're protesting the city's removal of encampments, which the city has been ramping up in recent months. The rallies were organized. Their organizers say shelter is the main issue here and that clearing out the encampments is making it worse.
They need to be advocating for real solutions along with housing first, and also acknowledging that shelters are not solutions, they're Band-Aids.
You cannot work on anything else in your life when your shelter is being impeded. So the first issue that needs to be taken care of is a person needs to be under a roof.
City leaders said they had a plan in place to help those unhoused ahead of Lee, and that they would be working behind the scenes to offer some protections.
And checking in on Down East Maine, the shores of Winter Harbor are now very quiet. Restaurants have deck furniture tied down and boats up on land. In Lemoyne, the fire department has generators and clean water standing by. They say they're ready for anything, which for them is business as usual.
made sure that all the equipment was operating. That includes generators, chainsaws, pumps. We have, several sump pumps if people's basements get flooded.
In Machias, the University of Maine campus has been fully evacuated of all faculty, staff, and students. The school will be closed throughout the day today.
Well, switching gears back to our live team coverage from the field.
We're checking back in with meteorologist Emily Santom, who is live in Southport. And how are the winds and the waves there, Emily?
Hi, Katie. The wind is really picking up. It's really picked up overall in the last hour or so. The winds are becoming a lot more gustier. And there was one of our gusts. Sending it back to the waves, though, one thing I did want to mention that we're in an area where we're more in the harbor part. If you look beyond the islands and the harbor itself, the ocean is extremely choppy. We're looking at large waves. Waves are projected to be between 15 to 20 feet for today, and they are just breaking. You can see the wind out there is really picking these waves up, but other than that, it has stopped raining here. So more so mid-coast and down east Maine will see the rain for today. Not much of western Maine will see a lot of rain, but what I'm really fighting out here is the wind. The wind will be projected to be gusts of 40 to 50 miles per more. Even parts of down east Maine could see up to 60-mile-per-hour gusts. Just about 20 minutes or so, there was a report of about a 42-mile-per-hour gust report. So we're definitely feeling the wind here. I think that's what one of the primary concerns for today is the wind and overall large waves. Not a day to be out in the water at all. Waves will be much larger towards lunchtime today and about early afternoon, as well as the wind. So the wind's only going to get stronger from here, blowing me all over this deck. I may need some sandbags later on if wind gets any gustier. So I'm live in Southport. I'm going to send it back to you, meteorologist Emily Santom.
Yeah, sandbags, probably a good idea, Emily. Thank you. And a reminder, you can track Lee and the conditions in your area in real time with our WGME weather app. It's free in your phone's app store. Search for WGME WX.
Now, obviously, we're planning for a lot of outages across the state today. And if you plan on using a generator in case you lose power, there's a few safety measures FEMA wants to make sure that you are aware of. You should not use a generator indoors near windows or open doors. That's because of carbon monoxide and fire risks. You should also install battery-operated carbon monoxide detectors so you're alerted if the levels in your home are unsafe. Now, always connect your generator to your appliances with heavy-duty extension cords, and don't connect your generator directly to your home's power supply, which could increase voltage or cause a surge to outside power lines that could not only hurt you, but also unsuspecting linemen who are trying to fix down wires. You can visit FEMA.gov or our website for a full list of safety tips. All eyes are on Lee this morning. We do want to show you some pictures of the calm before the storm.
It was pretty incredible. If you were able to see last night's sunset, you know how beautiful it was. And we want to show you some viewer pictures. This is from Zach, and it looks like he was out on maybe by a river. It looks like a smokestack.
He's got a little bit of wake out there behind him.
And a perfect caption, the way life should be, taking in that gorgeous sunset. And we also have one from Bobby Joe. And look at that, especially when you have the reflection on the water.
The clouds in the sky last night made it that much more vivid because they were like little waves up in the sky.
Almost sort of a sign of what's to come.
Absolutely.
When it comes to those waves out there today. And we'd love to see more of those photos, and especially storm photos if you can safely take them. Make sure and download the WGME 13 app and click on Chime In. You might see them right here on the air. It's 8:28, and we want to give you a live look outside. This is the theme today, those strong winds blowing around our sky camps.
Absolutely, a little shaky out there. You can see a couple cruise ships in port as well. We're told that they're hunkering down. Many of them had to cancel trips because of this impacts of Lee.
Makes sense, and we're tracking those conditions for you right here on CBS 13 and Fox 23. Welcome back. The emergency declaration from President Biden gives the federal government permission to assist the state now and after Lee impacts Maine. Aid coming in the form of mass care, evacuation, and sheltering support, too.
FEMA told us yesterday afternoon that agents were setting up all hands on deck, standing by for this morning.
FEMA is there in a support role, but we want to make sure that the localities, the counties, any tribal areas all have what they need, and they're the lead right now. So we're going to give them all the support they need to ensure that residents have the information.
Now, FEMA is urging Mainers to be prepared, have a kit ready to go, your phone charged, as well as some stored water. You can head to ready.gov or our website for more information about where emergency shelters might be set up. And we're going to continue to update that site all day as conditions continue to change.
Governor Janet Mills and the Maine Emergency Management Agency are urging Mainers to be prepared for Lee's potential impacts. MEMA says it's closely monitoring Lee's track this morning and coordinating with safety officials all over the state. In the meantime, they're offering some tips on how you can prepare for situations like this.
If you don't have an alternate source of power, then keep that in mind when you're choosing the food that you buy this week, or if you know that your refrigerator may not be working, you need food that you don't need to cook. You should also have a gallon of water per person per day, and don't forget about pets.
Officials also say you should keep cell phones and devices charged and have an emergency kit that's good for several days. And also, forecasts can change, so make sure and stay up to date.
Well, right now we're seeing the impacts of Lee across Maine's coast. Let's check in with Dave Eade, who's live in Old Orchard Beach this morning. And Dave, earlier people were still walking around out there, but the conditions obviously changing by the minute.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. As you mentioned, folks have been, walking along the beach all morning long, bringing out their dogs, and so far, really, the only thing here is, like everyone's been reporting, has been the wind. The gusts at times are very, very, very strong. And as I mentioned in our first hit, there are electronic signs throughout all of Old Orchard Beach reminding folks that the riptides are going to be really, really bad today. As you can see, the tide's starting to roll in ever so gently here. But the waves have been pretty impressive so far. I don't know if Colin, if you can get a shot. Some of the waves are really starting to intensify as the wind picks up and Lee makes its way through Maine. But we've got a runner here along the beach, and folks really just getting a good walk in the sights and sounds of Lee as it departs Maine. And there you see the pier as well. So far, all is good here in OOB. It's just been a lot of strong wind. We have had some rain at times, really more of just light showery type of rain so far. But we'll hear from some bystanders who are just walking through coming up a little bit later on. That'll do it from here, live from Old Orchard Beach. I'm CBS 13's David. Guys, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Dave, and you see this a lot when we report on these storms, that Mainers just saying, hey, it's Maine, we can handle this. We'll take the precautions, but we can totally handle it.
Absolutely. We're taking a live look in Augusta. Some conditions changing from the coast to inland Maine. The sky cam here not shaking as much as what we were seeing on the coast. So definitely depends on where you are in the state right now. The conditions very different.
It does. And we are seeing thousands of power outages right now, Christian. And you're very close eye. If we can get my microphone, there it is. You're keeping a very close eye on those wind gusts. We are seeing some really strong ones in different parts of the state.
Yeah, that's right, Katie. So far, we've avoided really any major winds that would lead to extremely widespread outages. We have seen some gusts approaching or exceeding tropical storm force in portions of the state. Basically, today's a moderate nor'easter. If it was later in the season here, that's basically the impacts we're looking at through the day. So here's a look at our Pembrokewood Point cam. Plenty of clouds out there. Windy as we start off the day, of course, with the offshore northerly winds. You can see the ocean pretty turned up here, but those northerly winds actually really helping us out here to avoid that coastal flood threat. It's keeping the push of water inland or towards the coastline tempered down somewhat here. So let's take a look at our current satellite and radar. Again, the worst of Lee by far avoiding us to the east here as it moves into Nova Scotia. Far down east Maine, you can see where we're seeing the worst impacts, the heaviest rain, strongest winds. That's where we're seeing all the damage reports so far this morning. I haven't seen any damage reports yet from central and southern Maine. Hopefully we can keep it that way through the day today and just keep our outages more on the scattered side. Rain is also very, very light. Again, rain is not a huge concern. Most of us not seeing really a whole lot of rain at all through the day today. So you can see on our current wind speeds, most of us just seeing gusts up to 30, very manageable out there right now. Now Washington seeing a hurricane force wind gust right now. Augusta gusted to 41 earlier, and Bangor did as well, up to 43 miles per hour. So again, we're going to continue to see the winds picking up here as we head into the late morning and early afternoon, nearing 40 miles per hour here in the Portland area, quickly tapering off heading into this evening. And due to the eastward track of Lee, we may avoid a lot of the major impacts in far western Maine. Just not looking all that impressive in terms of the wind speeds here for later on this morning. So let's take a look at our current stats on Lee. It's an 80 mile per hour post-tropical storm. It's basically a moderate nor'easter here sitting off of our east coast and about to move into Nova Scotia here, moving to the north and off to the east here very quickly later on today. So in terms of our impacts, again, the worst conditions are now through about 6 p.m. Frequent gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour, middle of the day especially. Again, we have those coastal concerns, especially at high tide, which is also in the middle of the day. Wave heights of 10 to 20 feet could cause that damage during the high tide period later on today. So hopefully we can avoid too many power outages here across the state. Probably not going to be the case mid-coast and down east Maine, but if we can avoid it at least in central and southern Maine, that would be some good news for us. Dan and Katie, back to you.
All right, Christian. FEMA aid is available after President Biden approved a disaster declaration for our state. Governor Janet Mills says that will help Maine be more proactive in its response, not just left dealing with the after effects.
Stages them more quickly. We don't have to wait till after a storm occurs and then ask for help. We did this preemptively for good reason, so that we'll be prepared ahead of time before damage occurs.
While the storm has weakened in recent days, MEMA is still prepared for widespread damage, especially from strong winds. MEMA's director, Peter Rogers, says they've been in contact with the state's major electric utilities, which are mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer we've had, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to outages.
The other piece is the trees are full canopies right now. They have all the leaves on the trees, the roots and the ground is soft. So pretty much the whole state is in that same situation. The winds will be stronger on the coast, but as you probably saw, they are going to start moving inland too. So, that's why we looked at having the whole state declaration.
MEMA right now is in full activation through the weekend, monitoring Lee's latest path.
And let's check back in with Mal Meyer, who is live for us in Portland. Mal, any changes to what you're seeing or feeling since we first started our broadcast at 6 o'clock?
Well, yeah, absolutely, Katie. The winds have definitely been picking up now. I just recorded a wind gust that was around 23 miles per hour down here by East End Beach and by the boat ramps. We're seeing a lot of people now coming out, checking it out, seeing the current conditions, just like Dave Eade mentioned down in Old Orchard Beach. People want to be out in the thick of it, experiencing it all. Actually, just over there, I'm actually seeing somebody bringing down their fishing poles. I don't know if they're going to actually be able to cast out a line here because it is just so windy. Now, again, when we're up by Fort Ellen Park, just on the top of the Eastern Prom, the winds weren't that bad. And when I talked to one resident over there, she said it didn't feel like any other storm here in Portland. But of course, it really depends on where you are, because down here by the water, and of course, as time goes on, the winds just continue to pick up. Now, I did talk to one guy a short time ago. He was visiting all the way from Australia. He was so excited to be here.
I got the sunny days, rainy days, and the storm.
And you came down to the beach to check it out.
Oh yeah. That was one of my bucket lists, so I'm going to tick that off today.
Now, ahead of the storm, Portland leaders were encouraging people to make sure that they tie down any loose objects that might be in their yard, things like patio furniture or recycling bins, just because with those wind gusts, they could be blown away. I was just talking to a city official just a short time ago, or rather a city worker, and he was telling me that they haven't had too many damage reports, and that was just about 15 minutes or so ago, just some construction barrels that had fallen over and blown away. So, that is the biggest concern right now, is just what damage these winds could cause, because again, right now they're just starting to pick up. So we'll see what today has in store for us. Reporting live in Portland, I'm Mel Meyer. Back over to you in the studio.
Yeah, a lot of trash bins blowing around this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it's not going to be much more than that.
Exactly. Mal, thank you. And we do want to give you a live look in York. The strong winds expected through much of Maine, and the coast is on high alert for those big waves that could cause damage and erosion. And the York beaches will be closed throughout the day today.
Yeah, all beaches and restrooms in that town will be shut down, and the walk to end Alzheimer's, which was scheduled for this morning, also canceled, unfortunately.
And as we've reported, businesses are hunkering down, taking preparations ahead of leave. That includes lobstermen who hit the water ahead of the storm to secure their assets.
I've taken up half my traps and shifted the other half inside into Pigeon Hill Bay, hoping for some cover while this hurricane hits. I've taken up 120 in the last 3 days, but I still have 120 out there right now. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I haven't been fishing too long, but I've been fishing long enough to know that 70, 80 mile an hour winds in here, 20, 25 foot seas is not going to be very good.
That's exactly right. And this comes at the end of a rough season for lobstermen, as well as other businesses who rely on the summer rush. From fog to all the rain we've received, Lee is just the cap on what's been an underwhelming few months.
Well, we're taking a live look from our rooftop sky cam here in Portland. A couple raindrops on there. Luckily, we're not going to be seeing too much rain today. The wind, on the other hand, a bigger storm.
Yeah, some big gusts headed our way. More on the storm coming up. Welcome back. As Lee sweeps into Maine, it is expected to be a very busy weekend for crews from Central Maine Power.
CMP's Director of Corporate Communications, John Breed, is joining us live now by phone. John, we checked in with you about an hour ago. Can you give us an update on where things stand outage-wise?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, so far the strongest winds we've seen have been along the coast. That said, there have been rain bands that witnessed and all of the Canadian border. That is counting scattered outages across our surface area, and somewhat with the National Weather Service tropical storm warning that was issued yesterday evening. As always, the safety of our customers and our crews are the number one priority for us, and we're working closely with meteorological teams, state officials, local municipalities to ensure we have the best information regarding the storm today. And if people do experience an outage, we will be sure there as quickly as possible.
And John, can you talk a little bit about the extra crews that you've brought in for this response, and how do you decide, how many crews you're going to bring in?
Right. So we have approximately 400 to 500 contractor crews that are joining CMP crews internally. We also have about 300 vegetation management crews available to manage tree care. We geographically those crews based on forecasting But given kind of the wide impact of this storm to our service area, we'll be across the state today. Obviously, though, the strongest winds currently are expected to be along the.
And John, one thing we've talked with your crews before is the challenge of when wind gusts really get sustained and you're unable to put, say a bucket truck up in the air to make repairs. At one point, do you guys make a decision to say, okay, we're going to, keep staging our crews and wait till these high wind gusts pass?
In the preparation of any storm, we work closely with emergency management officials. When the wind speeds are above 35 miles per hour, we can't put crews in those bucket trucks. So we work to prioritize road clearing and debris clearing to ensure people have access to roads they can move around in case there's an emergency. So unfortunately, with a storm of this nature, we need to make sure it's safe for our crews to restore power. What we will do is make lines safe. That is, if it's down, we will de-energize it, make that safe. We'll then have to come back at a later time to actually put someone in the truck to turn the power back on.
All right, we appreciate all the hard work the crews have done and will be doing, John, and we appreciate your time this morning. We did just hear from CMP about the impact they're seeing across the state from Lee.
Yeah, let's check in with our meteorologist, Emily Santom. She's live in Southport along the mid-coast. And Emily, that area going to be seeing some very high winds as the remnants of Lee move their way up the coast.
Yeah, Dan, it's pretty windy already here. We're getting some larger gusts as well. Oh, and there's our large gust. Moving forward, though, if you take a look at the waves, really, we're in a harbor area right now, so we aren't seeing any waves in this immediate area. But beyond the land and in the harbor itself, it is very choppy out there. There's a couple of birds actually sitting out on a dock. We've watched them attempt to fly away, and then they're just saying, never mind, back to the dock we go. So they've been hanging out there. They'll probably stick around for the rest of the day, honestly. It's really, really windy out there. A lot of gusts. You can probably hear my jacket right now. But something else we've noticed really in the past couple of minutes is that a little bit of blue sky up there. We have some of our low-level clouds still moving on pretty quickly. But other than that, we keep on seeing a little bit of blue sky. We got some large waves for later today. It's really all of this, the remnants of Lee are peaking this afternoon, probably around the lunchtime mark. We're going to see some locally heavy gusts onto the 40s, 50s even, and some larger waves looking to peak around 15, 20 feet. I know some of the buoys further out are projected to be in the mid-20s. So other than that, we're just fighting the wind out here. It's not raining anymore. Mid-coast and down East Maine will really see a lot of that rain for today. We're just fighting the wind out here, really. So I'm going to send it back to you guys in Southport. I'm meteorologist Emily Sansom. Back to you guys in the studio.
Emily, thanks. And we just want to update our viewers here real quick. We just heard from CMP, and we want to update you about some of the numbers we're seeing. CMP's website saying about 11,000 people across the state are without power right now in their coverage area. The majority of them are in Knox County with about 4,800 people. And then the next highest is in Androscoggin County. And then Versant's territory, down East Maine, kind of out of our coverage area, but 14,000 people up in that area without power.
And we anticipated this, Christian, as you were saying. The rain is not going to be a big factor. It is all about the wind and the waves.
Exactly. And down East Maine, we're seeing those big impacts now. Yeah, that number jumping really quickly as we're seeing some really heavy rain and very strong winds in far down East Maine. So let's take a look at our current wind speeds here in the central and southern portion of the state. Still seeing that tropical storm force gust in the Augusta area as of right now. You can see further down towards Bangor as well, seeing a gust to 43. Winds have been very, very tame in Cumberland County this morning. No other way to slice it than that. It's overall been pretty quiet this morning. Gusty, of course, but not enough to cause widespread outages as of yet here across southern Maine. Remains to be seen if we'll see that today. Hopefully we can avoid the worst of the outage potential here across the state. But let's take a look at our current satellite and radar. I'm really looking at this really heavy band of rain. This is the remnants of the core of Lee in far down East Maine. Look at all the damage reports popping up in Washington and Hancock counties. That's where we're seeing most of the power outages. That's where we've seen the strongest winds, where we'll see the heaviest rain, and where we will see the biggest waves as well. In that big band off to our east. Now, this band is not going to get all the way into central and southern Maine. It'll likely get to the mid coast, but a lot of us avoiding any heavy rain from that. And there's so much dry air, it would just eat it up anyway as it moved into the more western portion of the state. Better chance of seeing sunny skies than heavy rain this afternoon in central, western, and southern Maine. Saw a peak of sunshine in Mal's live shot and in Emily's earlier as well. So yeah, definitely that dry air moving in as expected as well. So let's take a look at our current wind speeds offshore, where we have no issues seeing very strong winds with no impediment here in the ocean waters to the wind. Winds gusting up towards 50 to 55 miles per hour, especially again down east Maine. That's where we've got that very heavy band, very strongest part of Lee, moving on into the state in the far down east portion of Maine. Again, tropical storm warnings are in place up and down the entire Maine coastline due to those wind gusts that we're going to be seeing. Also, all the offshore waters does extend inland to Androscoggin County as well as Kennebec County, including Augusta through the day today. Again, those strongest winds mid-coast to down east Maine. That's where we've seen the majority of the impacts this morning, most of the outages as well. Hopefully, that's where they stay. Hopefully we can just get through the day with just scattered outages for the rest of us. But again, we still have a long time to go with this storm, so way too early to say if we're going to avoid that or not. So mid-coast to down east Maine, 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts at their peak. In the Portland area, 40 to 50. Could even see some gusts higher than that, although I'm not seeing anything that is pointing towards that this morning. Winds have overall not been super strong out there in southern Maine. Let's talk about the winds, though. Again, they're going to peak likely later this morning and into the early afternoon, gradually tapering off after that point. Much calmer by this evening, much calmer tomorrow as well. Tomorrow, a great day to clean up all across the state with sunny skies and very warm temperatures expected. High tide today, 1247 in Portland Harbor, right around that, all up and down the coast. I've been watching this buoy out in the center of the Gulf of Maine. It's been increasing all morning. Now 16-foot waves reported there, 10 to 15-foot waves in far down east Maine, and 5 to 10-foot waves here as of right now in the far southern portion of the state along the Casco Bay coastline and down through coastal York County as well. These are going to continue to increase, especially around high tide later on this morning and early this afternoon. By around lunchtime, that's likely when we're seeing the peak of the waves, 15 to 20 feet up and down the coast. Again, could lead to damage, could lead to some overwash as well, although the offshore nature of these winds that we're seeing today really tempering that coastal flood threat. The main impact from the waves is just going to be the force of them causing damage as they hit the coastline. As we head into Sunday, much calmer. The waves die down. Everything with Lee dies down by this evening and into tomorrow. So again, I mentioned better chance of seeing the sun in western Maine than heavy rain today. Scattered showers tapering off here by the early afternoon. Going to be much quieter in terms of the rain out there. Winds will continue, though, even if we do see the sun. In fact, if we do see a little sun, it might help to mix down some of these stronger wind gusts. That will be something to watch through the day today. Again, worst conditions down east Maine. That's going to continue through this evening. Here we are, 4:30. Notice the corridor of sunshine here in western Maine. It actually might turn out to be pretty sunny out there this afternoon and evening. Beautiful weather on the way for Sunday. Again, near 80, sunny, dry, much better for cleanup out there tomorrow, and then every day next week looking a whole lot quieter. Dan and Katie, back over to you.
Much. A reminder to track the forecast and conditions in your area in real time. Make sure and download our WGME weather app. It'll come in handy today, and it is free in your app store. Search for WGME WX. And as we head to break, a quick update for you. Bath Police posting on Facebook. They're starting to see some trees and power lines down, causing power outages and traffic hazards. Right now, Wistig Road near Oak Grove is blocked off until crews can safely clear the road. And High Street near box 1086 is also blocked right now.
Saginaw County, Knox County, Waldo County, all up and down the mid-coast is where we've seen the majority of power outages this morning. CMP saying about 11,000 at this point. We'll continue to monitor conditions as they develop. This special edition of CBS 13 News continues.
Well, turning back to our coverage now of Hurricane Lee's impacts across the state. Again, the worst conditions we've seen so far this morning have been in far down East Maine. Look at all the damage reports starting to pop up from Hancock and Washington counties in far down East Maine. Here's one report from Goldsboro of a tree down in a yard. Lots of trees on power lines down there. It's also where we're seeing the highest power outages in the state. You can see the rainfall intensity is highest there. Wind speeds have also been strongest there. Haven't seen any major damage reports from central and southern Maine just yet as of this morning. Again, rain not a big concern for us today. It's going to be the winds and it's going to be the waves. You might also notice that it's pretty cool out there for the impacts from a former hurricane. 62 degrees in Portland. We're 61 in Lewiston, and in Augusta right now, 57 in Rockland. A lot of us going to be in the 50s out there through the day today. The churned up nature of the ocean has dropped the ocean temperatures as well into the lower 60s. Here's a live look at the Marshall Point Lighthouse up in the mid-coast. Again, another area we're expecting some of the worst conditions today. Definitely noticing that the waves are a lot closer to the lighthouse now at this point. And we're going to continue to see as the tide comes in here towards the middle of the day, those waves getting closer and closer to the lighthouse. We'll see if they can end up splashing over it here as we head into the afternoon or late morning hours. So here's a look at our current wind speeds out there. Winds gusting up to 35 to 40 miles per hour. Again, haven't seen any major wind gusts that would lead to widespread power outages yet across central and southern Maine. That's been all down east so far. Hopefully we can keep it that way, Dan and Katie, because if we can just keep the outages widespread there, that means our restoration times for everybody will be a lot faster.
I know, and it is amazing to even see a little blue sky and sunshine out there. How incredible.
I know.
It could be deceiving for some people too,
right.
though.
Exactly. The wind's still going to be out there, even if we do see a good amount of sunshine this afternoon, which is very possible. So.
Yeah, well, our team coverage on Lee continues all morning and all day long.
Yeah, join us as we report real-time live updates from the field and from here in the studio. This is a live look in Southport, and then we're taking a live look over Casco Bay this morning. A lot of shaking out there as the winds continue to ramp up throughout the morning.
Yeah, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Special Weather Authority storm coverage is sponsored by Casco Bay Generators.
Well, it's 9 o'clock. Thanks for joining us here on this special edition of CBS 13 News. All eyes have been on Lee this week, preparing for this moment. Thanks for joining us. I'm Dan Lamparello.
And I'm Katie Sampson. Lee is no longer a hurricane, but many Mainers are still feeling the impacts. We have team coverage for you this morning, bringing you the latest from the field in the studio as well. We have Mal Meyer bringing us the very latest from the Portland area and in Old Orchard Beach. We have Dave E joining us live. And of course, we have this live look, a shaky sky cam as we look over Casco Bay.
Absolutely. We don't want to forget Emily Santom, too. She's going to be up in Southport. So we have crews up and down the coast tracking this storm. Again, we're taking a live look over Casco Bay. A couple cruise ships in here that we're told are hunkering down. They couldn't make it to their next stops, so they're here in Portland, a safe harbor, if you will, ahead of this storm.
And let's get right to our forecast with meteorologist Christian Bridges. And Christian, we are seeing strong winds, but it's deceiving because it's not raining out there right now.
Yeah, it's not too rainy. That's one of our big benefits here with the storm passing to the east. We're on the much drier side of the system, so not getting all of the heavy rain, which we certainly don't need. We've had our fair share of flood events this summer. You could see on our Skycam out there the lack of boats, all the boats that would normally be out there on a typical morning, not out there this morning. Definitely a good day to just hunker down at home. So here's a look at our satellite and radar. You can see the bands of rain from Lee continuing to move across the state. However, by the time they reach central Maine, they really kind of peter out in terms of the rainfall. Just some sprinkles and light rain in central and southern Maine. Even some peaks of sun have been out there early this morning. That becomes more and more likely heading into the afternoon. Now, where we're not seeing any sun, that's far down east Maine. Notice the heavy rain, these yellows, oranges, and reds moving into Hancock and Washington counties. And watch all these damage reports quickly popping up here this morning. That's where, again, we are seeing the worst conditions. Likely this does spread into the mid-coast to some extent as well. Notice Bangor, just seeing a damage report coming out of there of a tree down. Starting to see these damage reports spreading a little bit further inland. That will continue throughout the day. So here's the latest statistics on Lee. Again, it is no longer a tropical cyclone. It is essentially a big, powerful nor'easter sitting off of our coastline here. Winds still at 80 miles per hour, gusting up to 100. Of course, that's not impacting our coastline, but winds like that are very possible to our east in Nova Scotia as Lee continues to approach its landfall later on this morning. Moving very quickly through Nova Scotia into the Maritimes here and then out to the east and out of our hair by tomorrow. Sunday is going to be dramatically nicer out there. A beautiful day expected by tomorrow. But for right now, wind gusts again are pretty gusty out there, especially mid-coast and down east Maine. Once you get to about Rockland and continue east from there, that's where the winds really are picking up this morning. Augusta, I've seen a gust there up to 41 earlier, now gusting pretty close to that tropical storm force level. Rockland as well seeing a gust to 35. Bar Harbor gusting to 38. And Bangor, where we just had that report of a tree down, winds gusting to 45 miles per hour there. Otherwise, in central and southern Maine, or most of southern Maine at least, winds have been fairly manageable this morning. Haven't seen any major gusts above 35 to 40 miles per hour. So here's our headlines with Lee. It goes through 6 p.m. this evening for the worst conditions, likely worst weather overall, middle of the day today, late morning, early afternoon. Frequent gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour. And again, we do have those coastal concerns as well with the huge waves at high tide later on today. Dan and Katie, back to you.
Christian, thank you. And our team coverage continues with meteorologist Emily Santam, who's live right now at the New Wagon Town Landing in Southport. How are things going there, Emily?
Hi, Katie. It is getting a lot windier out here. It's quite literally blowing me across the wharf. It's just becoming very more frequent. I feel like the wind is just picking up here in general. We're going to see gusts to 40, 50 miles per hour in mid-coast and down east Maine, like Christian said just a couple of minutes ago. Taking a look out to the waves, we're in the harbor area right now. This is where we are stationed, but beyond the harbor, the waves are extremely choppy. A little bit of some splash over on this part of the island right here. This little inlet over there. We're looking more so at high tide, which is around 12:47 this afternoon. We're thinking that we're going to see some more larger waves, a little bit more of some splash overs as well. But other than that, we're just really feeling the wind, especially here in the harbor itself. You can see the wind gliding across the harbor waters. And here's another wind gust. Overall, the birds, they don't want to fly. They try to fly, but the wind's really just holding them down. I feel like this is just our main primary concern right now is the wind. I've heard of a couple of tree reports, especially out on the coast in Maine. That's because the ground's just so saturated. We've got over 18 inches of rain just this summer itself. So those trees are just going to have such a harder time with the soil just loosening up the roots in general. So that's why we're going to see a lot of trees toppling over, taking down power lines today, mostly seeing some power outages out on the coast where there are tropical storm warnings. But really what we're just fighting with today is the wind. Wind is a primary concern for today. It's starting to rain just a little bit in Southport, but not too heavy. We'll see some heavier downpours down in down east Maine, a little bit on the mid coast, more so down east, I should say. But other than that, we're just we're trying to fight the wind today. It's really that's all we got. It's just the wind. It's wind and waves. Not a great day to go swimming. Not a great day to stand out on a wharf either. I'm going to send it back to you guys in the studio in Southport. I'm meteorologist Emily Sansom. Back to you guys.
All right, from the Mid-Coast where Emily is to Portland, we are tracking Lee's real-time impacts across our state this morning.
Yeah, let's check in with Mal Meyer, who is live for us in Portland. He's been there for the past 3 hours. And Mal, you said you saw some people with fishing poles.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're having a lot of fun out here on the Eastern Pond this morning. A lot of people coming down here to check out the winds. Before I show you that person who is now out there fishing, I'm going to show you our wind gauge because we've been showing it to you throughout the morning. And really what's been different here over the last hour and a half or so is that the winds are picking up, and B, they are much more sustained and much higher. Here's a good gust coming in now. We're picking up 20, 21, about 22 miles per hour there. It looked like it was making a run for it. So really, again, in the low 20s, 20 mile per hour range. That's what we're experiencing down here by the water. But this wind is not stopping people from having fun down here. We've been seeing a lot of people out walking their dogs, but there is that guy out fishing, and I did just talk to him a short time ago. I asked him if he comes down here often, and sure enough, he does. He likes to go out by East End Beach. He was trying to figure out the best way to cast his line into the water, and he was deciding to go with the wind, and it looks like he has been out there fishing now. So hopefully we'll check in with him in a little bit and see if he's managed to have any luck despite the conditions. But a lot of people out here just coming out and checking it out. I've been talking with residents about what they think, and that is really the question of the day here is, what are Mainers making of the remnants of Lee? So far, they say it's pretty much just like a regular big storm. Not too impressed, but we'll see what the rest of the day brings. Reporting live in Portland, I'm Mel Meyer. Back over to you in the studio.
All right, Mal, we'll check back in with you in a little bit. FEMA here in Maine says they're ready to help if needed for what's next.
There are definitely boots on the ground. Urban search and rescue is another layer of support that's provided. So there are resources in place in case people find themselves in a position to need rescue. And of course, all the assets that are there at the state's request are where they need to be.
Now, this FEMA aid is available after President Joe Biden approved Governor Janet Mills's emergency disaster declaration request. That action, which the governor is now praising. Mills says this is helping crews better prepare for any possible damage that could occur. Maine's emergency management agency is now fully activated to monitor Lee's anticipated impacts as well. And while the storm has weakened, MEMA says it's still expecting widespread damage, especially from high winds.
That wind field is over 300 miles long, so the state will get damages. We will lose power.
Director Rogers says MEMA has been in contact with the state's major electric utilities. They're mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer that we've seen, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to outages.
And we do want to give you a live look at the conditions. This is York. And, you know, we checked in with our partners, WJR, a couple hours ago. And in Narragansett, Rhode Island, we saw some surfers taking advantage of the big waves.
Yes.
But if you're thinking about doing that in York, not a good idea, because the beaches in York are actually closed today, as well as the restroom facilities, everything having to do. Police just don't want you to head to the beach.
It's a proactive approach,
Right.
Obviously. They're keeping people's safety in mind. The tides are going to be changing, heading up towards the noon hour. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about venturing out.
And if you plan to travel by plane today, make sure and check your flight status before heading out the door. This is a live look at the Portland Jetport's website. The latest update was posted earlier this morning around 7 o'clock, which is in that yellow bar at the top of your screen. It says about half of all flights scheduled for today are now canceled because of high winds.
Before the most recent update, the Jetport was only expecting some minimal impacts, but that's obviously changed. We'll continue to monitor the Jetport's website and bring you the latest updates once they come in today.
And we're heading right outside, a live look at those conditions. We are seeing thousands of power outages, closely following those, and we'll have an update from the Maine DOT coming up. Yeah.
Well, we're continuing our coverage. It's 9:12 here on your Saturday as we track Lee. Right now, power outages top many people's minds, but there are also concerns about roads, ferry service, other things like that.
Paul Merrill from the Maine Department of Transportation is joining us live now on the phone with the latest on what they're seeing and the challenges expected this weekend. Paul, good morning. Tell us the current situation right now.
Hey, good morning, guys. Nice to talk to you. All ferry service routes are canceled today in anticipation of high seas. Should the storm really miss us, the captains do have the discretion to go back and make runs. We'll update on our ferry service Facebook page if that happens. But as of right now, all ferry service runs are canceled. Other than that, we're still kind of watching and waiting as things start to pick up here. We've got staff in MEMA's Emergency Operations Center, and we've got our own Emergency Ops Center in Augusta monitoring road and bridge conditions. Nothing major to report so far, thankfully, but we're ready if we have to support MEMA or do any emergency ops.
And Paul, can you talk about, I was up in MEMA yesterday. They fully activated that operations center, and to have everyone in there coordinating and make sure that, crews are staged in the right place. How important is that ahead of a storm like this?
We have folks on standby all over the state, but we know that this may be a particularly impactful event for down East Maine, Washington County, east of Bangor. So we know to be on high alert for those areas. As far as our coordination with MEMA, communication is key. We have two staffers who are pulling 12-hour shifts to be in the MEMA Ops Center, and everything DOT related from MEMA goes through those two guys. So it's really a streamlined communication to make sure that we can be in a position to get any help we need to provide to the affected areas as quickly and efficiently as possible without having to go through a big phone tree, right? It's kind of a single point of contact at MEMA's Ops Center to us, and then we call out the troops from there.
And Paul, what's the biggest message or piece of advice that you would want to get out there for our viewers who are watching right now?
I know we're following the forecast, and we don't know exactly what to expect because Mother Nature's unpredictable. I know where I live in southern Maine, I've barely seen a raindrop so far, but we know that can change instantly. I think Mainers are smart and know to be prepared and not do unnecessary travel. And as things start to heat up, if you see a downed power line, don't approach it. If you see water over a road, don't drive through it. You don't know whether it's an inch deep or a foot deep, or whether the road underneath has been damaged or destroyed. And give our folks and our partners at CMP and other, line crews, emergency workers, give them the time and space they need to do their jobs well. We're trained to do this stuff. We're trained to be safe in doing it. Just like when you see a plow truck during a snowstorm, give us plenty of space. The same goes for when we're in emergency operations because of rain, wind, and, hurricane conditions.
Some great advice there, Paul. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning, giving us some advice to our viewers and updating us on the current conditions out there on the road.
Thank you.
Well, we're also getting news that Maine is starting to see some effects of the gusting winds. The Bath Police Department posting on Facebook saying that they're seeing some trees and power lines down, resulting in outages and some traffic hazards there. The latest update on their Facebook page says crews have blocked off Whiskeg Road, that's near Oak Grove, and a portion of High Street. They also expect more road closures throughout the day. Well, switching gears to our team coverage, our Dave E. joining us live from Old Orchard Beach this morning. And Dave, it looks like the surf behind you is gearing up. I noticed on Pier Fries, they posted on Facebook, they're going to be closed today. So probably not a lot of people going to be down at the beach. What's it looking like out there?
Yeah, good morning, Dan. This would have been my one chance this summer to get some pier fries, wouldn't you know it? But really, the story so far has been the wind and the waves. Colin, if we can get a shot underneath the pier there, you can really see the waves crashing in. I would say the most I've seen, guesstimating between 8 to 10 foot waves at its peak, but the tide is rolling in. It's still very windy. We haven't seen a lot of rain. We have seen a lot of folks walking the beach. Vern Cook is up from Massachusetts. And Vern, you've been out here a while. What do you think so far?
I think it's gorgeous.
I love watching the ocean like this.
Yeah, it certainly has been something to see. You know, the beach is, you know, we see a lot of dogs, a lot of folks walking, some runners and everything. You've been coming up to Maine for a while now. Is this you know, as far as tides go and waves, is this as bad as you've seen?
This is the worst I've seen, yeah. Actually, we came up just to see this.
Yeah, honestly, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. When you staying to?
We're going back Monday.
Beautiful. Well, safe travels, and thanks so much for
Well,
joining
thank
us
you.
this morning. All right, guys. So that's it. Again, not a lot of rain here and OOB, but a lot of surf. And as we've been telling you all morning, they don't really want folks in the water today because the riptide is really bad out there, and I'm sure it's not going to get any better anytime soon. Reporting live in Old Orchard Beach, I'm Fox 23's David Christian. We'll send it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. Looks great out there in Old Orchard. Hopefully we can keep the impacts from erosion and that sort of thing down in Old Orchard Beach pretty minimal through the day today. But again, those waves, big concern with that as we head into this afternoon, and just good idea to stay away from them if you can. So here's a look at our satellite and radar. You can see the heaviest rain still confined to far down East Maine, where it's going to be staying today. That's also where the strongest winds are, where we've seen the most damage reports and power outages from this morning. In fact, it looks like the sun's probably about to come out in some peaks here as we head through the next couple hours in the Portland area and further southward and westward into far western Maine. But again, we're going to continue to watch these bands as they continue to pivot into the state here and as those winds pick up heading later into the morning and into the early afternoon. So let's get a look at our current gusts. Again, not seeing any major winds right now in the Portland area, gusting up towards 30 miles per hour. Similar story in Lewiston, although Brunswick now seeing gusts approaching tropical storm force at 36 miles per hour. So could start to see some power issues there. Up towards Augusta as well, we've seen some gusts there at or above tropical storm force as well. The worst of the winds by far, though, are offshore, just off the coastline here, gusting up to 55 miles per hour, even closing in on 60 and far down East Maine at the Jonesport buoy. But anywhere along the Maine coast, seeing tropical storm winds offshore. Portland buoy gusting to 45, and out in the center of the Gulf of Maine, gusting to 54 miles per hour. So very easy to see why all of the coastal waters and the entire coastline itself of Maine is under a tropical storm warning through the rest of the day today. It does extend further inland in Cumberland County out towards the Lakes region, up towards Lewiston, Auburn, as well as Augusta and all of Kennebec County. And then further up the turnpike towards Bangor. Also, we still have that tropical storm warning in place. And easy to see why when we're looking at our peak gusts here today. Again, mid-coast, down East Maine. That's where we're going to see the biggest impacts here. Again, we saw we heard that report from Bath of the trees down there, roads closed, and a bunch of reports like that coming out of far down East Maine. That likely does spread a little bit further westward down towards, say, the Brunswick area and really along the immediate coastline. That's where we'll likely see the biggest impact with gusts. Again, 50 to 60 miles per hour. Could even see an isolated gust or two, especially on offshore islands, even stronger than that. From the Portland area up through Lewiston towards the Augusta area, further inland through Franklin, Oxford, Somerset counties here, 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts expected, easily enough though to lead to some power outages here over the next several hours and as we head into the early afternoon. Haven't seen any gusts near that level yet, but again, there is that potential as we head later on into this morning and into the afternoon. So let's track that out for you. We're going to see the winds continuing to ramp up here over the next several hours, gusting close to 50 miles per hour at their peak from the Portland area up through Lewiston, Auburn towards Augusta. Again, mid-coast and down East Maine. That's where we've got the potential for even stronger gusts at or above even 60 miles per hour at times. And again, that's where the highest power outage potential is as well. Here we are, 6:30 this evening. Notice starting to wind things down. The winds will be dying down by that point, looking much calmer out there by this evening. And by the time we get into late tonight and tomorrow, much calmer out there. Tomorrow is looking gorgeous. It's going to be a beautiful day for our Sunday for cleanup and just getting outside after a messy day today. Far down East Maine has a coastal flood warning, but the track much further to the east with Lee really just eliminates that flood risk. We've got a very powerful offshore wind, so that's really tempering that coastal flood threat. It's fighting back against the push of water into the coastline here. So not a major coastal flood threat, but the wave threat is still very high. Again, those big waves slamming into the coastline here, that's where our big concern comes from. So looking at our current wave heights, notice down East Maine, 10 to 15 foot waves now being reported. We've watched these increase all through the morning, and out in the Gulf of Maine, look at that, 16 foot waves right now. And you can see here at our Portland buoy, down through far southern Maine, 5 to 10 foot waves as of right now. Again, these are really going to become very noticeable at high tide, which is around 12:47 in Portland Harbor, and within an hour or so of that, up and down the entire Maine coastline here. So again, big impacts, especially at high tide, with the highest impact towards down East Maine, where we see those biggest waves approaching 20 feet here, right around high tide, which is again at 12:47 in Portland Harbor or around there, up and down the Maine coastline. Again, even offshore, we could see waves even higher, approaching 25 feet here. So the worst of the wave conditions this afternoon, good idea to stay away from the ocean, or if you are going to be close to it, just keep a very healthy, very safe distance. Rogue waves, again, big concern today as well, that could unexpectedly sweep in and easily pull you out to sea. One thing that is not a major factor today, though, again, that's the rainfall. It's the wind, it's the waves. That's what we're looking at today. Better chance of seeing the sun later this afternoon than seeing raindrops in most of western Maine. And notice, it does help to warm us up a little bit. It was initially looking like we would see more clouds and likely stay in the 60s. Now, if we get a little bit extra sun out there, could not rule out reaching the low 70s this afternoon. Again, it's not going to make a difference with the wind speeds, but at least we're not dealing with major flooding rain, as often comes with the tropical system. So very good in terms of that here across the state. By Sunday morning, it's beautiful. We're clear out there. Beautiful afternoon tomorrow, right around 80, sunny, a nice breeze out there, but not tropical storm force winds. So it's going to be much nicer for getting outside and enjoying. So we just got to make it through the next few hours here through the early to mid afternoon, and then things are going to start improving here. Dan and Katie, back to you.
All right, Christian. Thousands are waking up without power around the state right now. Central Maine Power reporting more than 16,000 of their customers are in the dark, with most reports coming from Knox County, with 5,500 customers without power, and Waldo and Androscoggin also seeing high numbers.
Versant Power also reporting outages with over 19,000 of their customers without power. We'll keep tracking both companies throughout the day, both on the air and online. And we have Asia Reed heading to Rockland right now. Pretty hard hit when it comes to outages.
It is. That whole mid-coast area we're seeing, which as expected, Christian has been saying, and Emily Santom, who's up there in Southport, they were both saying the wind is going to be the hardest up in the mid-coast area.
And Asia will be live as we continue our team coverage live at noon on CBS 13. Stay with us. Welcome back. Checking in on down East Maine. The shores of Winter Harbor are very quiet now. Restaurants have deck furniture tied down and boats up on land. In Lemoyne, the fire department has generators and clean water on standby. They say they're ready for anything, which for them is business as usual.
Made sure that all the equipment was operating. That includes generators, chainsaws, pumps. We have, several sump pumps if people's basements get flooded.
In Machias, the University of Maine campus has been fully evacuated of all faculty, staff, and students. The school will be closed throughout the day today.
Well, switching gears back to our live team coverage from the field this morning.
We're checking back in with meteorologist Emily Santom, who's live in Southport. And Emily, have the winds picked up out there?
Hi, Katie. They are really picking up out here. So we're in front of the wharf this time, and now the winds don't seem that bad. But as soon as we start walking towards the wharf, we have our trees that would usually protect us from the wind. But really, towards the wharf, it's really when the wind is going to start picking up. We're looking at gusts 40, 50 miles per hour. So you can really see the wind starting to pick up over here. It stopped raining, which is good. Most of mid-coast and down East Maine will really see the rain for today. Other than that, what we're really fighting with, what most of Maine is fighting with today, is the wind. We have some large waves as well. If you take a look at the waves, they are just breaking in open water. Once again, we are in a harbor. So the water around us is just more so the wind's pushing it by, but we are taking a look on the ocean. Like I said, extremely choppy waves. We got some large waves hitting the islands out there too. We're thinking more so towards high tide. As we're heading towards high tide, I should say, those waves are going to start getting closer. Now, this island that was out here probably about an hour or two ago, there wasn't any water over that island. This is actually brand new that I'm seeing now for the first time. That water is starting to build over the island. And like I said, as we get closer to high tide, whoop, there's our big wind, guys. As we get closer to high tide, those waves are just going to be larger, and wow, this wind gust is not ending. Oh, there we go. So other than that, it's just going to be really windy. Not a day to spend outside by the water, as even near on the water, as it's just really windy out here. What I can say from being out here on a wharf, the birds are having a tough time. They're not into the flying part today. We're just mostly tracking these waves. They'll peak out towards the afternoon hour, probably early afternoon. Wind gusts, especially for the coast, will continue to grow stronger as I think we'll max out more towards the afternoon. So I'm going to send it back to you guys live from Southport. I'm meteorologist Emily Santom. Back to you guys in the studio.
It is a really interesting visual to see the wind blowing the water out there, Emily. Thanks so much. And a reminder to track Lee and the forecasting conditions in your area in real time. Make sure and download our WGME weather app. It'll come in handy today. It is free in your app store. Search for WGME WX.
A good thing to keep in mind, too, if you lose power, we can stream through that app. Yes. And if you do lose power, using a generator in case of those power outages, there's a few safety tips FEMA wants you to be aware of. You should not use a generator indoors near windows or open doors. That's because of carbon monoxide and fire risks. You should also install a battery-operated carbon monoxide detector so you're alerted if the levels in your home become unsafe. Always connect your generator to your appliances with heavy-duty extension cords, and don't connect your generator directly to your home's power supply because that could increase voltage or even surge to outside power lines, which could not only hurt you, but also unsuspecting linemen who could be out there fixing lines. You can visit FEMA.gov or our website, WGME.com, for a full list of safety tips. While all eyes have been on Lee this morning, we do want to show some of the pictures of the calm before the storm.
If you were able to catch last night's sunset, you know just how beautiful it was. And we want to show some of our viewer photos. This picture is from Zach, and you can see the bright orange and yellow and the interesting formation of the clouds too.
It was pretty cool to see all like the wispiness, almost like waves of those. And this one from Bobby Joe came in as well. I mean, the rocks and the reflection on the water.
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't get much better than that. Love the colors, almost like a purple hue. Beautiful. And we'd love to see your photos today as well. If you can safely take any storm pics, download the WGME 13 app, click on Chime In, and we may show them right here on the air.
Well, it's a little after 9:30 here on your Saturday as our CBS 13 special coverage continues. Our sky cam right there in Portland Harbor, shaking with the wind.
Welcome back. The emergency declaration from President Biden frees up the federal government to help the state now and after Lee impacts Maine. That aid coming in the form of mass care, evacuation, and sheltering support.
Now, FEMA told us yesterday afternoon that agents were setting up. It's an all hands on deck effort standing by for this morning.
FEMA is there in a support role, but we want to make sure that the localities, the counties, any tribal areas all have what they need, and they're the lead right now. So we're going to give them all the support they need to ensure that residents have the information.
FEMA is also urging Mainers to stay prepared. That includes having a kit ready to go. You have water stored as well. For more information on emergency shelter locations, head to our website, WGME.com.
Governor Mills and the Maine Emergency Management Agency have also been urging Mainers to be prepared for Lee's impacts. MEMA says it's closely monitoring Lee's track this morning and coordinating with safety officials all over the state. In the meantime, they're offering some tips on how you can prepare for situations like this.
If you don't have an alternate source of power, then keep that in mind when you're choosing the food that you buy this week, or if you know that your refrigerator may not be working. You need food that you don't need to cook. You should also have a gallon of water per person per day, and don't forget about pets.
Officials also say you should keep cell phones and devices charged and have an emergency kit that's good for several days. Also, forecasts can change, so make sure and stay up to date.
And we're keeping up to date on the conditions right now. We're seeing the impacts of Lee all across Maine's coast. Let's check back in with Dave Eade, who's out at Old Orchard Beach.
I'm Dave Eade here in Old Orchard Beach. So far, the story here hasn't been so much about the rain, but the waves. You can see them crashing into the pier here. We've seen waves as really as high as 10 feet so far, but we have seen a lot of people walking along the beach. Deb Chartier from Manchester, New Hampshire. You're up on vacation.
Yes, we are.
What do you think so far of Lee?
It's been pretty calm actually this morning. We'll see around high tide. I think that might be a little bit stronger. Let's put it that way.
Visually, though, to see the waves, isn't it nice?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love to watch the ocean anyway, but the waves are really something.
Deb, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
You have a good day.
You too. All right. So we have seen a lot of folks walking their dogs. We've seen some joggers here in OOB. I would like to say, though, they are recommending no swimming today due to the rip tides. They are very, very strong today, as you might imagine, with the remnants of Lee coming through here. A lot of high tides, not a lot of rain. Reporting from Old Orchard Beach, I'm CBS 13's Dave Eade. Now back to you.
Yeah, the wave's a big factor, the wind as well. Here's a live look outside over Casco Bay. Some cruise ships in town kind of hunkering down, and it's shaky out there for sure.
It is, and that wind having an impact. We've been updating you all day about these power outages that we're seeing. And just quickly looking at CMP's website, about 20,500 people across 20,500 customers rather across our area are without power right now, the majority of which are in Waldo, Lincoln, and Knox County, so up and down the mid-coast.
And let's check in with meteorologist Christian Bridges. Christian, you were saying we're kind of going to see these winds ramp up, looks like the next couple hours?
Yeah, that's right. Peak winds likely middle of the day today, late morning through the early afternoon for most of us. And again, mid-coast and down East Maine by far most impacted from Lee today. And that's where we're already seeing the big impacts out there this morning. A really impressive, very rare satellite image here this morning. Not too often. We've got a hurricane sitting offshore, at least the remnants of a hurricane, nor'easter now, sitting off the coastline of Maine, now approaching its final landfall in Nova Scotia. You can see the center of circulation right there. Look how expansive this circulation is. New York City seeing clouds from Lee, and so is Newfoundland, further east than Newfoundland even, seeing the clouds from Lee. So the entire northeastern part of North America here covered by the clouds from Lee this morning. Very big storm, and that's why the impacts are so wide ranging across not just Maine, but all over Atlantic Canada and the Northeast. So let's take a look at our radar here. You can see underneath those clouds, not a whole lot of rain is falling out there across most of central and southern Maine. Notice how as these rain bands move towards the west here, they really dry out. In fact, here in the Portland area, some hints of sunshine out there as of right now. Now, that's definitely not the case mid-coast to down east Maine, especially from Penobscot Bay over to the east. Look at all these damage reports coming in from Hancock and Washington counties. We've seen wind gusts very strong just off the coastline of Washington County. There was 2 gusts, one to 77 miles per hour, another one to 80 miles per hour. So pretty easy to see why far down east Maine is getting the worst of the damage reports and power issues this morning. And again, here's a look at our current wind speeds out there. Most of us seeing some gusty winds, but nothing too major out there, especially in southern Maine. 29-mile-per-hour gusts, Lewiston, Portland, and over in Wiscasset as well. Gusting close to 40, though, in Augusta. And we have seen an uptick in the outages towards central Maine as well. Rockland seeing gusts to 35 right now. Bar Harbor up to 38. Bangor seeing a gust to 45 miles per hour. Likely a peak gust in Bangor today, close to if not above 50 to 55 miles per hour. So here's a live look up in the mid-coast where we are seeing some of these stronger winds out there. Again, an offshore wind. You can see if you can crane your eyes there at this little flag that's blowing right by the Pemaquid Point Lighthouse. It's offshore. It's pointing towards the ocean here as those winds are blowing offshore. So again, that helps us with the coastal flood threat. Doesn't really help us, though, in terms of wind damage, as if any 40-mile-per-hour gust, no matter which direction it comes from, has the potential for those outages. So here's the latest on Lee. Again, I mentioned that 80-mile-per-hour wind gust off the coast of Washington County. That's what Lee's winds are at right now, 80 miles per hour. Even though it is no longer a hurricane, it is still a very powerful nor'easter offshore, and again, moving out by tomorrow with much better conditions expected. Dan and Katie, back to you.
All right, Christian, thanks. FEMA aid is now available after President Joe Biden approved a disaster declaration for our state. Governor Janet Mills says that declaration helps Maine be more proactive in its response, not just left dealing with the after effects.
Stages them more quickly. We don't have to wait till after a storm occurs and then ask for help. We did this preemptively for good reason, so that we'll be prepared ahead of time before damage occurs.
Now, while the storm has weakened in recent days, MEMA is still prepared for widespread damage this morning, especially from strong winds. MEMA's director, Peter Rogers, says they've been in contact with the state's major electric utilities, which are mostly worried about tree damage after the already wet summer that we've seen, meaning every section of the state could be vulnerable to outages.
The other piece is the trees are full canopies right now. They have all the leaves on the trees. The roots and the ground is soft. So pretty much the whole state is in that same situation. The winds will be stronger on the coast, but as you probably saw, they are going to start moving inland too. So, that's why we looked at having the whole state declaration.
Now, MEMA is in full activation through the weekend, monitoring Lee's latest path.
Let's check back in with reporter Mel Meyer, who is live in Portland. And Mel, you've spoken with a few people out there along the Eastern Prom this morning.
Yeah, a lot of people are just taking in the wind. Ooh, we got a good gust coming here right now. We've been really seeing those winds pick up here over the last couple hours since we've been out here on the Eastern Prom. We've been capturing wind gusts up to about 30 miles per hour when we're up the hill, and down here below, we've been seeing anywhere from 15 to 20 to 25 miles per hour. There are a lot of people out here coming down to check out what this storm will bring. You can see behind me a lot of people out on East End Beach enjoying the weather, taking it all in. But, we were hearing Dave describe the waves down in Old Orchard Beach up to 10 feet. We just aren't really seeing that much here, but it's still capturing a lot of attention. Of course, I spoke with one man who is coming here from all the way from Australia, and he was so excited to be here for this.
I got the sunny days, rainy days, and the storm.
And you came down to the beach to check it out.
Oh yeah. That was one of my bucket lists, so I'm going to tick that off today.
Now, while this might seem like a lot of fun now to come down here, Portland officials were also concerned about the risk for potential flooding later on today. We know that high tide is at 12:47 today, so right around the 1 o'clock hour. So, the concern there is that for the low-lying areas and for those problem spots around the city that there could be potential flooding. People are reminded that if there are barricades up, that you don't want to go around them because you just don't know how deep the water is or what damage could lie below. So if you do see them up anywhere here in the city or, of course, wherever you're traveling, just be sure to not go around those. Reporting live in Portland, I'm Mel Meyer. Back over to you in the studio.
All right, Mel, thanks so much. We are keeping a close eye and monitoring damage reports all over the state, as well as closed roads and things like that. And look at this video. You just found this, Dan, on Twitter.
This is the Maine Forest Service, the Maine Rangers. They're out, obviously, like all state agencies right now, monitoring the damage. This is in Cathans Township, which is down east. They say this is Route 191. A large pine tree came down, and they've been assisting trying to get that out of the road because if it had impacts on kind of travel in that area.
Yeah, and the post saying a ranger and a Maine DOT crew removing that large white pine tree. We just talked with the Maine DOT just about how they're ready to go to respond to anything that happens. It can happen in an instant. And you can see the wind with those trees as well. A huge factor there.
Another reason to just be careful if you do need to head out there today, that this is a fluid situation and the winds are changing rapidly, especially heading into the afternoon.
And we're tracking all of that for you right here on CBS 13 and Fox 23. Stay with us. Much more to come in just a few minutes as we give you a live look in Augusta. Welcome back. As Lee sweeps into Maine, it's expected to be a very busy weekend for crews from Central Maine Power.
Yeah, CMP's Director of Corporate Communications, John Breed, he's been very nice to take some time out of the busy day here to update our viewers about the latest challenges facing CMP with this storm. And John, what's the latest out there for us?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Kate. Yeah, we're currently out addressing outages across our service area. We've seen about 28,000 total repaired and restored about of those. So our crews are hard at work right now. As the winds pick up throughout the day, we will be addressing other customer needs as they arise.
And John, how do your crews make sure that the winds are at a safe, speed that they are able to continue with their restoration work?
During a storm, there are a lot of tools that go into crew safety. One of those is speed. The bucket truck is in winds that are greater than 5 miles per hour. We have a hard time getting our crew up. That's because of safety reasons. So we will prioritize the work like making lines safe and helping emergency management officials clear roads of fallen trees or other debris to ensure things like emergency vehicles can move where they need to go. I'll take this opportunity to remind customers that if you see a down power line, please stay well clear of it. We've all heard Jim Wright say it, no line is safe ever. And if you have power, the best way to report it is either by phone, calling us, our CMP mobile app, or by visiting our Outage Central online.
Absolutely. That's an important one because I know a lot of people, a lot of police departments have put out, don't call 911 for a power outage. Make sure you report it with CMP. So I'm glad to hear that that your crews are out there making sure that everyone keeps the lights on during this storm. And John, we appreciate you taking the time out of your morning to update our viewers about the safety tips and what they should expect throughout the day.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, we did just hear from CMP on the impact they're seeing across the state from Lee.
And let's check in with meteorologist Emily Santom. She's live in Southport up on the mid-coast. And Emily, the conditions have been changing up there rapidly for you. What's the latest?
Hi, Dan. The latest is that these wind gusts are going to be more consistent. It's becoming a lot windier out here. We're getting to the max part of the day, more so mid-afternoon. These waves are becoming even larger. If we take a look out past the harbor, and like I said just a couple of minutes ago as well, we are in a harbor, so there's no immediate waves over to where I am right now, just the constant wind and the heavier wind gusts as well, pushing the water out to sea. Those waves out in the actual ocean, though, the more open ocean, I'm suspecting that they're at least 15 feet. These waves are huge. They are breaking constantly. You can probably hear how windy it is too. It's basically wind versus wave right now. Birds have given up on flying. They're done for the day with the windy conditions. The wind is just pushing me towards this way on the deck. High tide's coming up at it's so windy out here. High tide's coming up later today around 12:47. The tide is beginning to come on in over the islands. So we'll start seeing more towards the 12 o'clock hour, some waves further out over here. So we'll keep you guys updated on that, especially during the 12 o'clock hour later today. Other than that, stopped raining. Parts of mid-coast and down East Maine will really see the rain for today, but it is not raining. It's actually becoming a little more brighter. We saw blue sky already, as well as the sun. So I think the western parts of Maine will also see the sun later today. But other than that, it's basically waves, wind, high winds, I should say. We're in a windy spot right now. But other than that, that's also why trees are coming down, is because the soil's so wet and it's so windy out, pushing those trees down. I have more coming up later today in Southport. I'm CBS 13 meteorologist Emily Santom. Back to you guys.
Yeah, it's definitely windy out there, and this really is ramping up right now, you know?
And, you know, Christian, the big thing people might be wondering, Emily kind of mentioned it there, we may see the sun this afternoon.
Right.
But that does not mean that this storm is out of the woods just yet.
Right.
Exactly. We could see sunshine and 45-mile-per-hour winds exactly at the same time. So it doesn't diminish that wind threat in any way. And I just saw on poweroutage.us, 38,000 customers without power all across the entire state of Maine. And again, those are customers. So a customer is a household. So a lot more people than that seeing power outages right now. And they've mainly been confined to far down East Maine and towards the mid-coast, but we could begin to see those spreading further westward and southward down the coastline here over the next several hours. In fact, just seeing a wind gust just off of shore Cape Elizabeth, 51 miles per hour there. So if we see some of those gusts on shore here over the next couple hours, especially late this morning, early this afternoon, that's really going to increase our power outage risk. Look at all the damage reports coming in from far down East Maine, at least a dozen, if not more, and every minute more popping up down there, down trees, down power lines. The videos there shows how much windier it is in far down East Maine, much closer to Lee. Lee's going to pass right through there into the Bay of Fundy, and it will make its closest approach to far down East Maine. So that's why we're seeing the worst impacts there. For the rest of us, though, we're also seeing gusty winds, just not as bad as it is in down East Maine. Winds gusting up towards 30 miles per hour in Portland and in Cape Elizabeth as well, up towards Lewiston also. And Augusta approaching 40 miles per hour. We've seen a couple gusts there at and above 40 miles per hour. Now offshore, that's where the winds are even stronger. Look at that Jonesport buoy in far down East Maine reporting huge waves right now and reporting a 60 mile per hour wind gust. Very easy to see why down East Maine is dealing with a lot of issues right now. Up and down the Maine coastline, notice how the winds gradually taper down just a bit as you head down the coast, back into the 40s by the mid-coast and then into the upper 30s to around 40 off of the York County coastline here. So very strong winds offshore, tropical storm conditions going to be ongoing all day, if not continuing to get worse here over the next couple hours as Lee, again, makes its closest approach late this morning. So let's take a look at our tropical storm alerts in place, a tropical storm warning for the entire coastline of Maine and all the offshore waters as well. It does extend inland somewhat as well towards Sebago Lake, up towards Lewiston, Auburn, Augusta also, and it does include Bangor, really all of eastern Maine included in that tropical storm warning. Again, peak gusts, which we've already seen verifying in down east Maine, 50 to 60 miles per hour, Brunswick through Wiscasset over towards Rockland, across all of Penobscot Bay, towards Bar Harbor, and of course down towards Eastport in far down east Maine. Slightly less extreme wind levels here for the rest of us, but still 40 to 50 mile per hour winds. When we see those, if we see those later this afternoon or late this morning, could easily lead to power outages. That does include the Portland area, most of Casco Bay, up through Lewiston, Auburn towards Augusta and into the foothills as well as all of York County, likely seeing those strong winds. So late morning through early afternoon, that's the peak of the worst conditions here for most of us. Again, up to 50 mile per hour gusts for the Portland area through Lewiston to Augusta. There we go. There's that 60 popping up in Rockland. Could see some gusts at the 60 mile per hour level or even higher from Rockland further down east. Now, the good news is by this evening, conditions look to improve pretty rapidly here. The winds are going to die down by sunset. Many in western Maine are going to see another probably very beautiful sunset tonight as we clear out our skies. And then tomorrow looks like a stunner, much better weather, looking great for cleanup, power restoration all day tomorrow. Again, coastal flooding, not a huge concern here, but the concern comes once we see high tide late this morning or early this afternoon with those big waves slamming directly into the coastline at high tide. The wave heights, we've been watching these all morning, continuing to increase here each half hour we pull up this graphic. So look at Jonesport buoy reporting 60 mile per hour winds right now and wave heights of 18 feet. That is certainly enough to do some damage. Also out in the Gulf of Maine, approaching 20-foot waves, and here in the Portland area, the Portland buoy, nearing 10-foot wave heights. And again, by high tide, these wave heights will really increase substantially here. So we are going to see that continuing here over the rest of the morning. So you guys, we are going to continue tracking this through the rest of the morning. And of course, at high tide, 12:47, that's when we have the highest risk of the wave damage.
All right, Christian, we'll check in with you in a few more minutes as we take a live look in Rockland. This is the lighthouse, the breakwater there. The waves really starting to ramp up. And as Christian says, as we go to high tide, we'll probably see this covered up.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Our coverage of Hurricane Lee continues as it impacts Maine across or all up and down the coastline this morning. You can see all of the damage reports really quickly coming in from down east Maine, starting to see some popping up near Bangor as well, and starting to see some more of those elevated wind gusts spreading further south and westward here throughout the state. Again, rain not a big concern today. It's the winds and it's the waves, especially at high tide later on this afternoon. Again, a tropical storm warning in place for those tropical storm winds and big wave impacts through the rest of the day today, including all the offshore waters, including Portland up towards Lewiston and Augusta as well. Let's take a look at some of these wave heights, which have been very, very impressive. Again, 18-foot waves at Jonesport Buoy and in the Gulf of Maine as well. Those approaching the coastline here, and by high tide around 12:47 this afternoon, we'll really notice the impact of those slamming into the coast. So for today, peak wind gusts 50 to 60, mid-coast to down east Maine. That's where we're going to see the biggest impacts, more widespread outages. But 40 to 50 mile per hour winds, that's nothing to sneeze at either. That is also likely to lead to a lot of power outages elsewhere across the state. So we still got plenty of hours to go here with this storm. Winds only going to continue to ramp up here, peaking late this morning through the early afternoon, you guys.
And I just checked CMP's website for a final check on those outages while we're here on the air. About 19,000 right now. So we're going to see that number climb.
Yes,
for
it's
sure.
been fluctuating all morning. Most of them focused on the mid-coast area, which typically is what we were expecting with this storm.
Hopefully the nice weather tomorrow really helps to get it restored super quickly, and the quick end of conditions tonight too.
Yeah.
It's interesting how we'll be bookend.
I know.
It was great last night.
Weather,
Beautiful tomorrow.
That beautiful on fire sunset to a beautiful day tomorrow.
Yeah, well, we do want to give you a final look outside the conditions while we're here on the air. This is Bar Harbor. It's a mess out there for sure when it comes to the winds and the waves.
It really is. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of CBS 13 News. We'll have plenty more coming up at noon as well as 7 p.m. tonight and all our social media platforms throughout the day.
Stay safe out there.